Hi, everyone. My name is Grace, and this is my story. To be honest, I never imagined I'd be sitting here writing this, but after everything that's happened in my life, I feel the need to share it. I'm 25 years old now, but everything started when I was 17, just a few months shy of turning 18. That was the year my world was shattered, and I was left picking up the pieces. It all began when my dad suddenly passed away. He suffered a cardiac arrest one evening, and just like that, he was gone. No warning, no gradual decline. One moment, we were sitting around the dinner table, and the next moment, he was lying lifeless in the hospital. I still can't wrap my head around it. Losing him wasn't just the loss of a father. It felt like losing the only person who truly understood me. We had a special bond. He was my rock, the one person I turned to for advice, comfort, and even laughter. My dad made me feel seen and heard in a way no one else ever did. After his funeral, when the grief was still raw and my mind was clouded, my dad's lawyer gathered the family to read the will. It wasn't a huge inheritance. My dad wasn't wealthy by any means, but he had made smart investments over the years, and that made a difference. To my surprise, the lawyer announced that my dad had left everything to me. The family home, all of his assets, everything. The house, the one my dad and I had shared for years, was now legally mine. At that moment, I wasn't fully able to grasp what that meant. The grief was too heavy, and everything felt like a blur. But as soon as the lawyer finished reading, my mom's reaction snapped me out of my daze. She was furious. I hadn't seen her this angry in a long time, but this was different. The second she heard the house was mine, she started yelling at the lawyer, demanding to see the will again for verification. I didn't understand why she was so upset, but I could tell there was more to it than I realized. You see, my parents' marriage was never easy. It was, in fact, one of the most dysfunctional marriages I've ever witnessed. There was constant tension between them, and neither of them was free from blame. They had started their marriage with what seemed like love, but over the years, that love faded, replaced by resentment and frustration. My mom, in particular, could never handle how successful my dad was. She had always been career-driven, and after having me, she was forced to take years off work due to pregnancy complications. My dad supported the family during this time, and though he encouraged her to bond with me, my mom resented it. She resented me. I could feel it from a young age. My mom wasn't one for affection, and I was constantly criticized for the smallest things, whether it was the way I tied my shoes or how I handled my schoolwork. Nothing I did was ever good enough for her. I always felt like a burden. While other kids had moms who showered them with love and support, I was lucky if my mom even acknowledged my existence. In the early years, it was my dad who filled the emotional gap. He was the one who taught me things, made me laugh, and made me feel like I mattered. I clung to him because, in a household where emotional neglect was the norm, he was my lifeline. But as time went on, things became even more strained between my parents. My mom went back to work when I was around 14, but her career was never the same. She hated the fact that she had to rebuild her career after stepping away, and her frustration only made things worse. I learned quickly to fend for myself. After school, I would come home, fix myself a quick meal, and do my homework. My mom was often too busy to notice or care. The only time she seemed to be present was when she was out with her friends, leaving me to navigate the world on my own. I was used to being on my own at that point. My mom was a ghost in the house, and I was simply someone who lived under the same roof. When my 17th birthday came around, I decided I wanted something different. I wanted a celebration. I wanted to feel important, to feel like I was worth celebrating. My dad, who was always more thoughtful and supportive, agreed to help me plan a small birthday party. It wasn't extravagant, just a gathering with a few close friends. But the one person who should have been there, my mom, refused to attend. She didn't even offer an excuse. She just made it clear that she didn't want to be involved. At that point, I had learned to accept her absence. It didn't hurt as much anymore, but it still stung. Despite my mom's absence, the party went on, and for the first time in years, I felt like I wasn't invisible. My friends were there, we laughed, we ate cake, and I felt like a normal teenager. But as soon as it was over, reality set in again. My mom was still gone, emotionally, and there was no escape from that truth. Then, just a few weeks after my birthday, everything changed. My dad died unexpectedly, and just like that, the world I had come to rely on crumbled. It felt surreal, and I was left to navigate the fallout on my own. My mom, who had never truly been present, was now gone from my life in a way that I could never have prepared for. I wasn't ready for the weight of what came next. The legal battles, the grief, and the realization that the one person I had hoped would be there for me was nowhere to be found. But as I would learn, it wasn't just my dad that I lost. It was the last shred of hope that I had for a relationship with my mom. The morning after the will reading, everything started to sink in. But it wasn't until my mom's reaction that I truly understood the depths of what had been happening beneath the surface for years. I wasn't prepared for the intensity of her anger when she found out that my dad had left everything to me. To be honest, I hadn't fully grasped the weight of it myself. The shock of losing him, the pain of the empty house, and the disarray of funeral arrangements had clouded my thoughts. But when I saw her face twist with fury, the reality hit me like a ton of bricks. My mom immediately started yelling at the lawyer, demanding proof of the will. Her voice was loud, sharp, and cutting through the room. She accused him of making a mistake, asking to see the document again. She didn't seem to care about the fact that my dad, her husband, had passed away. No, what she cared about was the house that I had inherited, the house that she'd never truly felt at home in, the one my dad had worked so hard to maintain and care for. The very same house where I had spent my childhood, both happy and painful, but it was mine now, not hers. I couldn't understand her reaction at first. Why was she so upset about this? Wasn't she grieving too? Wasn't she going through the same loss as me? But as she started demanding that the lawyer explain the will, I realized something deeper was at play here. Her anger wasn't just about losing my dad, it was about losing control, losing something she felt entitled to. And that's when I understood the true nature of our relationship. My parents' marriage was far from perfect. It wasn't the kind of relationship you read about in fairy tales. They had a toxic dynamic that was slowly eating away at them for years. My mom, despite her career-driven ambitions, had never fully accepted the role of being a mother. She regretted having me, resented the time it took away from her career, and it seemed like she never quite forgave me for being born. Growing up, I always sensed her frustration, her emotional distance, and her coldness toward me. It was never outright hatred, but it was always there, just beneath the surface. I remember her saying things like, "I wasn't built to be a mother," and "I should never have had kids." She would say it in front of my dad, sometimes in front of me, and it cut me to the core every time. But I never really had the words to explain how that made me feel. I didn't know how to talk to her. Every attempt to bond, to get some kind of affection or warmth, was met with rejection or dismissal. The few times she did engage with me, it felt like it was out of obligation, not love. My dad, on the other hand, was the one who always tried. He made an effort to spend time with me, to show me that I mattered, even if it was just a few hours at dinner. He was the one who took me out for dinner dates, talking about everything from work to school. Those were the moments I cherished. Those were the moments I felt like a daughter, not just an afterthought. But even with my dad's efforts, the tension between my parents never really subsided. My mom, when she went back to work after I turned 14, resented having to start over. She was angry that she had to rebuild her career after taking time off for me. I understood her frustration to some extent, but it never gave her the right to treat me the way she did. So when my dad passed away, I thought, maybe hoped, that his death would bring some kind of resolution, some kind of peace to our family. But instead, it just highlighted the cracks that had always been there. My mom didn't want to deal with the emotional fallout. She didn't want to be a part of any healing process. She never had been, and now it was clear that she never would be. When the lawyer finished explaining the terms of the will, my mom turned to me, her face twisted in disbelief. "You don't deserve this," she said, her words sharp and full of venom. "You're just a child. You don't know how to handle this house. It should be mine." The words cut deeper than I expected. This wasn't just about the house. It was about everything that had built up between us over the years. It was about her resentment of me, her jealousy of my dad's relationship with me, and her constant dissatisfaction with her life. The house, this symbol of everything my dad had worked for, had now become the battleground where my mom's unresolved feelings would be played out. She made it clear that she was going to fight me for the house, and from that moment on, she did everything in her power to try to manipulate me. She tried to convince me to sign the house over to her, saying that I was too young to understand what it meant to own property. She argued that she needed it more than I did, that it was hers by right, but I wasn't about to give in. I wasn't about to let her take what my dad had left for me. For the first time in my life, I felt like I had something that was truly mine, something that I didn't have to share, something that wasn't tainted by my mom's bitterness. The house was the last gift my dad had given me, and I was determined to protect it. But as my mom's manipulation grew more intense, I realized that I wasn't just fighting for a house. I was fighting for my sense of self. I was fighting to hold on to the little bit of love my dad had given me before he was taken away. I wasn't going to let my mom destroy that. It wasn't just the house that was at stake. It was my identity, my past, and my future. The house was a symbol of everything my dad had done for me, and it was the only tangible connection I had left to him. I wasn't about to let my mom take that from me. The days that followed were filled with stress, anger, and constant tension. My mom didn't give up on trying to manipulate me, but I stood my ground. I knew that if I gave in, I would lose everything. Everything my dad had worked for, everything he had hoped for me. But the more I resisted, the more I realized how alone I was in this fight. My mom didn't care. She only cared about herself, about getting what she wanted. And as much as I wished things could be different, I knew that I couldn't change her. So, I prepared for the fight of my life, the one where I would stand up for myself, for my dad's legacy, and for the future I had to build on my own terms. After the will reading, everything became a battleground. I had inherited the house, but it seemed like my mom had inherited all the resentment and anger in the world. It didn't matter that I was grieving, that I was just a teenager trying to navigate the loss of my father. The only thing that mattered to her was the house. The same house that she had never truly cared about. The same house that had once been a symbol of the dysfunction in our family. Now, it was a symbol of something much more dangerous. Control. My mom's anger didn't stop at the lawyer's office. It spilled over into every corner of our lives. She'd call, demanding I meet her, trying to guilt me into giving her the house. She'd leave messages, sometimes crying, sometimes screaming. You don't know how hard I've worked for everything. You can't just take everything from me, Grace, she'd say. The words were like daggers, and every time she said them, I felt a little bit more of my strength draining away, but I couldn't let her win. I couldn't let her continue to manipulate me into believing that I owed her anything. I wasn't responsible for her unhappiness, for the choices she made. I wasn't the one who had forced her to stay in a marriage that was falling apart. But that's what she wanted me to believe. Everything was my fault. Everything was because of me. The phone calls kept coming. Her demands didn't stop. I had never felt more alone than I did in those weeks. My mom, the woman who should have been my rock, was now my biggest adversary. And in some twisted way, I could see the reflection of everything she had said to me over the years in her actions now. She had always blamed me for ruining her life, and now, with my dad gone, she was determined to take whatever was left from me. One evening, she showed up at the house, uninvited, her face red from the anger she had been bottling up for days. Grace, I need you to listen to me. This isn't about the house. This is about what's right, she said, standing in the doorway. Her voice was harsh, but underneath it, I could hear the desperation of someone who had spent years trying to make her life work and failing at every turn. I've sacrificed everything for you, she added, her eyes wild. And now you're going to turn your back on me for a house? I looked at her and felt a coldness spread through me. You're not asking for a house, Mom. You're asking for control. You always have. And you know what? I'm done giving it to you. Her expression faltered for just a moment, and then she quickly regained her composure. You don't understand. You never have. Her voice cracked as she spoke, and for a split second, I saw a flicker of something that resembled pain in her eyes. But I couldn't feel sorry for her anymore. Not after everything she had done. I stood my ground. No, Mom. I understand more than you think. I understand that you've never really been there for me. Not in the way a mother should be. And I understand that you've never cared about this house or anything my dad left behind. You just care about getting what you want. The words hung in the air, thick with the weight of years of resentment and unspoken pain. She didn't say anything at first, just stared at me, as though trying to process what I had just said. But then, without a word, She turned and walked out. I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel victorious. I just felt empty. I knew it wasn't over. I knew that this was only the beginning of a much bigger battle. And I was right. The very next day, my mom contacted my grandparents. She tried to convince them that I was being unreasonable, that I was being unfair. She told them that I was trying to take everything away from her and that she deserved the house because she had been married to my dad. I couldn't believe it when I heard about it. She was trying to turn my grandparents against me, but they saw through her. They had always been able to see through her. My grandparents had been the ones who had stood by me when my mom wasn't there. They were the ones who had comforted me when I was crying after my mom's emotional neglect. They were the ones who had made sure I had the stability I needed when everything else in my life was falling apart. When I heard from them, they told me that they had spoken to my mom, and they had made it clear to her that they would not be supporting her. They weren't going to let her manipulate them into siding with her. They were on my side. But even though they had my back, I could feel the strain between us. They wanted to believe the best in my mom. They wanted to believe that she was just going through a rough time, that maybe she would come around. But I knew better. I had lived with her for 17 years. I knew how she operated. And I wasn't going to let her destroy what my dad had left for me. As time went on, the pressure grew. My mom didn't back down. She kept pushing, kept demanding, kept trying to convince me that I was wrong, that I was being selfish. But every time I stood up to her, every time I said no, I felt a little stronger. I knew this fight wasn't just about the house. It was about taking control of my own life, of standing up for myself in a way that I never had before. And yet, as the battle between my mom and me raged on, I couldn't help but wonder, was this really about the house? Or was it about something deeper? Something that I didn't fully understand? My mom had never been good at letting go of control. And now, after all these years, she was using me and my dad's death as a way to regain it. She wasn't just fighting for a piece of property, she was fighting for her own sense of power. The weeks dragged on. Every day felt like a constant battle, one that I didn't want to fight but knew I had no choice but to face. I was determined to hold my ground, to make sure that my dad's wishes were honored, that his legacy was protected. But it was hard. It was exhausting, and I wasn't sure how much longer I could keep going. But there was one thing I knew for sure. I wasn't going to let her win. I couldn't. Not after everything she had done. Not after everything she had put me through. I would protect what my dad had left me, and I would protect myself in the process. The weeks after the will reading were a blur of tension, anger, and silence. Every time I stepped into the house, I could feel my mom's presence lingering in the background. Like a dark cloud, constantly looming over everything, she would send me messages, trying to guilt me into handing over the house, telling me I was too young, too naive to understand the responsibilities that came with it. But no matter how many times she texted or called, I held firm. This was my inheritance, my father's final gift to me, and I wasn't going to let her take it away. I didn't know how to explain it, but the house was more than just bricks and walls to me. It was a reminder of my dad. It was where we shared moments, dinner dates, quiet evenings, late-night talks. It was his legacy, and I wasn't about to let my mom, the woman who had treated me like a burden all my life, take that from me. I wasn't a little girl anymore. I had learned to stand up for myself, even if it felt like I was standing alone. As the days passed, my mom's behavior grew more erratic. She would show up at the house, knocking on the door, demanding that I speak with her, but I refused to let her manipulate me. The thought of her stepping foot inside the house made my skin crawl. It felt like she had no right to be there anymore. She hadn't been a mother to me in years, and now she wanted to come back into my life only because of the money and the house. I wasn't stupid enough to fall for that again. One day I came home from work to find an envelope waiting for me on the doorstep. It was from my mom's lawyer. My heart sank as I opened it, scanning the contents. It was a formal demand, asking me to sign the deed of the house over to her. She was pulling every legal string she could find, trying to manipulate me through threats and intimidation. She was playing dirty, and it hit me like a punch in the stomach, but I wasn't going to let her win. I didn't even think twice. I called my dad's lawyer and had him look over the papers. He assured me that they had no legal ground to stand on. I was the rightful owner of the house, and no matter how many legal threats my mom made, she couldn't take it away from me. The relief that washed over me was temporary, though, because I knew my mom wouldn't stop. She had never been one to back down when she thought she could get what she wanted. But it was the phone call that came later that evening that truly shattered whatever hope I had left for any kind of relationship with her. I was sitting at the kitchen table, trying to focus on my work, when my phone rang. I didn't recognize the number, but something told me it was her. I hesitated for a moment before answering. "Grace." My mom's voice came through the line, cold and sharp. "We need to talk." I took a deep breath and set my pen down. "What is it, Mom?" Her voice was full of tension, like she was trying to control her anger, but it was still there, simmering under the surface. "I'm not going to let you get away with this. You're being selfish. You think you can just take everything from me, don't you? After all I've done for you, all I've sacrificed, and now you're going to keep the house from me. You think you can handle all of this on your own?" I let her words sink in, but I wasn't going to let them break me anymore. "I'm not taking anything from you, Mom. This is my inheritance. This house is mine. You don't get to dictate what happens to it just because you want it. You've never cared about me or my future. You're just angry because you didn't get what you wanted." There was silence on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, trying to control her emotions. Finally, she spoke, her voice quieter but still full of venom. "You're just like your father, you know that? Always thinking you know what's best. You don't understand how hard I've worked for everything I have, and now you're just going to turn your back on me like this?" "I'm not turning my back on you," I said, my voice firm. "I'm standing up for myself. For the first time in my life, I'm not letting you manipulate me. I don't owe you anything. You abandoned me, Mom. You were never there for me, and now you want to come back just because you need something. I'm done. I'm not playing this game anymore." There was a long pause. I could hear her faintly sobbing, but I didn't feel the slightest bit of sympathy. For all the years she had neglected me, all the times she made me feel worthless, I wasn't going to let her back into my life just because she was emotionally manipulating me now. "I hate you," she finally spat, her words venomous and sharp. "You'll regret this. You'll see. One day, you'll come crawling back to me, begging for forgiveness." Her words stung, but they didn't break me. I had already forgiven her. I had forgiven her years ago for everything she had done. The real question was whether I could continue to let her back into my life. The answer, now that I had experienced how deep her selfishness ran, was no. I hung up the phone and sat there for a moment, my heart racing. I knew I had made the right choice, but it still felt like a weight was lifting off my chest. I was free. For the first time in a long time, I felt like I was in control of my life. I wasn't going to let my mom manipulate me, not anymore. A few days passed, and I didn't hear from her again. The silence was almost peaceful, but I knew it wouldn't last. She had already shown me what she was capable of, and I wasn't naive enough to believe she would just give up. But for now, I had won. And for once, I was at peace with the decision I had made. But that peace wouldn't last. The next chapter of my story was just around the corner, and I knew it would bring even more challenges. After the phone call, I thought I had reached the end of the road. I thought I had drawn the line in the sand, and that I had made my final decision. But what I didn't expect was that my mom wasn't going to back down. The silence that followed felt too quiet, too calm. It made me nervous, like the calm before a storm. She wasn't the type to just give up. She never had been. But what came next completely shattered any illusion I had left about who she was. It was just another evening, a few days after the phone call. I was in the kitchen making dinner when the doorbell rang. I wasn't expecting anyone, so I hesitated before answering it. When I opened the door, I saw her, my mom, standing there, looking like she hadn't aged a day. Her eyes were cold, but there was something different about her now, something desperate. "Grace," she said, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Can we talk? I've been thinking about everything." I stared at her for a long moment. It wasn't the first time she had shown up at my door, but something in her expression made me feel uneasy. It wasn't just about the house anymore. I could see it in her eyes, the desperation, the need to fix something she couldn't quite grasp. It was like she was searching for something, but I wasn't sure what. I stood in the doorway, not letting her in. "What is it, Mom?" She sighed, her gaze drifting to the ground for a moment. When she looked up again, her face softened, but her words were carefully chosen, as if she was weighing every syllable. "I know I've done things to hurt you. I can't change that, but I'm asking you to listen to me, just this once. I need you to understand. I crossed my arms, staying firmly in the doorway. Understand what? Exactly. That you've never cared about me? That you've always been so consumed by your own bitterness and resentment that you couldn't even see how much I needed you? Do you really think I don't know that? Her face flinched at my words, but she pushed through. I know I've been a terrible mother. I've made mistakes, and I can't take them back, but I want to explain why I've acted this way. I've been so focused on my own pain, my own regrets, that I never considered how it might affect you. I laughed bitterly, shaking my head. You think you can just explain it all away? After everything? After you abandoned me when Dad died? After you let me fend for myself all those years? You think that's enough to fix everything? There was a pause, a silence that stretched on for too long. And then, in that silence, I realized something. My mom wasn't here to apologize for her behavior. She wasn't here to truly make amends. No, this was something else. This was just another one of her manipulations. A last-ditch attempt to get what she wanted. Why are you really here, Mom? I asked, my voice low but steady. What do you really want from me? Her eyes flickered, and for a moment, I saw the truth. She wasn't here because she cared about me. She wasn't here because she suddenly had a change of heart. She was here because she needed something from me, something she wasn't willing to admit. I want us to be a family again, she said. But even as she spoke, I knew it was empty. I could see through her words, like a veil of lies she was trying to hide behind. I've been thinking about everything, and I realized that I need to fix things with you. I can't keep living with this guilt. I wasn't buying it. No, Mom. You don't get to come back into my life just because you're feeling guilty now. You don't get to erase everything you did just because you think I'll let you. You're not sorry. You're just looking for a way to ease your conscience. And I'm not going to let you use me for that. Her face hardened, and the mask she had been trying to wear cracked. I could see the anger bubbling up inside her. You don't understand, she hissed. You think you know everything, but you don't. You've always been so ungrateful, Grace. I've sacrificed everything for you, and this is how you repay me. You think you can just throw me out of your life like this? I stood firm, unmoving. I don't need you to sacrifice anything for me, Mom. I never asked you to. All I ever wanted was for you to love me, for you to be there when I needed you. But you couldn't even do that. You never did. And now, you want me to forgive you for everything? No, I'm done with you. She stepped back, visibly shaken, her face twisted with frustration. For a moment, she just stared at me, her lips trembling with words she didn't say. And then, finally, she spoke again, this time with an edge to her voice I had come to recognize all too well. You think you're so much better than me, don't you? She spat. You think you can just live your perfect little life without me. You'll regret this. You'll see, I'm your mother. You'll always need me. I shook my head, disappointment flooding my chest. No, I won't need you, not anymore. You made your choice a long time ago, and I'm not going to keep letting you drag me down with your lies and manipulation. I've moved on, and with that, I closed the door, not just physically, but emotionally. I had already said my piece, and I wasn't going to let her pull me back into the darkness she had created for so many years. I didn't care what she thought anymore. The woman standing outside that door wasn't my mother. She was just someone who was desperate to hold on to the control she had once had over me. As I leaned against the door, I finally felt a weight lifting off my chest. I wasn't carrying her anger or her disappointment anymore. I wasn't carrying her burden. I was free. The phone rang a few times after that, but I didn't pick it up. I knew what she wanted, and I wasn't going to give her the satisfaction of knowing that she could still manipulate me. This was my life now, and I was determined to live it on my own terms. I knew she wasn't done with me, but I was done with her. I was done with the games, the guilt trips, and the constant emotional abuse. It had taken years for me to get to this point, but I was finally free, and that freedom felt like the first breath I had taken in years. After the confrontation, things felt different. The weight of years of trying to gain my mother's approval, the constant battles over my worth, were finally lifted. I had done it. I had protected myself and drawn a line that I couldn't allow her to cross again. The silence in the weeks that followed was both relieving and unsettling. I thought I would feel angry or sad, but I didn't. I just felt free. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for someone else's validation. I wasn't waiting for my mom to show up and finally be the mother I had longed for. Instead, I was focusing on building a life that was mine. The house, the one my dad left me, became my sanctuary. I began making changes, turning it into a space where I could finally breathe. Every room I renovated, every little detail I changed, felt like reclaiming parts of myself that had been buried for years. I was no longer living in the shadow of my past. I was creating my future, and I was doing it on my terms. My grandparents, who had always been there for me, were a huge source of support. They didn't pressure me to reconcile with my mom, and for that, I was grateful. They understood that the emotional damage had run too deep. Instead, they encouraged me to heal and to live my life with the same strength my dad had always believed in. A few months later, I landed a job I'd been dreaming about. It wasn't just about the money or the career, it was about knowing that I had achieved something on my own. I wasn't defined by my past anymore. My work gave me a sense of purpose, and with the flexibility it offered, I was able to travel, to experience the world in a way I'd never imagined. It was like the whole world had opened up to me. As for my mom, I don't think about her much anymore. I don't waste time wondering if she'll ever change, if she'll ever realize what she lost. That's her journey, not mine. I've found peace in accepting that some relationships aren't meant to be fixed, and that's okay. I'm finally living for me, and that's all that matters.
Story 2. This article is titled, I Paid My Sister's Bills for 4 years. Then I discovered she and her fiancé had stolen my investment opportunity and laughed at me. So I made sure that their lives fell apart overnight. Hello everyone! Before we go into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let us keep this channel growing collectively. Thank you very much. Now let's begin the video. Hey Reddit! I thought I'd whine on here for a bit because my life is deserving of Reddit posts. So, 32 letters. I've been sending money to my sister for 4 years straight. Not the other way around, as one might imagine. $900 every month to help with their mortgage and expenditures. Yeah, I've essentially been their personal ATM since they were drowning in debt. This whole incident began when I was just getting settled into my job as a welder at a nearby manufacturer. Nothing flashy, just honest work, you understand. The compensation wasn't spectacular, but it paid my bills. And since I was unmarried and had no children, I believed I could help them out. I wasn't rich, but I wasn't poor either. My sister Emma, 30, and her boyfriend Tyler, 33, were too proud to seek help. So I stepped up, since that's what family members do, right? I told myself it was only going to be for a little while, until they got back on their feet. They appeared appreciative at first, with all the OMG, you're a lifesaver, and I will repay you soon texts. But a month became 6 months, then a year. Then, before I knew what was going on, I had been bankrolling them for 4 years with no return. And believe me, it had a negative impact on my life. No vacations for me. I haven't gone on a trip in years. Forget saving for a house. I hardly had enough money to enjoy my own stupid life. My diet became ramen 4 nights a week, and not the pricey type, just the sad 30-cent brick. You sink in hot water, hoping it won't taste like regret. My buddy Mike was always like, dude, are you coming to the game this weekend? And I'd have to come up with an explanation about being busy. The truth was that I couldn't afford the tickets. After contributing money, my fund budget was almost non-existent. What about dating? Oh, what a joke! I would meet someone, things would be going well. Then reality would strike, dates cost money. And when you have to choose between having dinner with a girl and preventing your sister and her boyfriend from defaulting on their mortgage, you start to appear like a broke loser. I had one female question me, why don't you ever take me somewhere nice? What was I supposed to say? Because my sister and her fiancé are financially stupid, and I am too nice to cut them off. Yeah. Very attractive. So I've simply started avoiding significant relationships. What was the point? Any female I've dated deserves someone who can afford a weekend away, or even a dinner that isn't on a dollar menu. Meanwhile, Emma would send me pictures of them dealing with bills strewn out on the table, looking anxious and like an idiot. I kept wiring money. What is the worst part? I was working so hard to make it happen. 10-hour days in a welding shop were hotter than Satan's armpit. Sparks fly everywhere. I returned home fatigued, filthy, and aching, just to repeat it all the next day. At this time, my hands were virtually permanent calluses from the extra hours I worked. That money went directly to them. Then one day, they declared they were marrying. I assumed they'd finally tell me they didn't need my help anymore. I imagined Emma would remark, "Hey bro, thank you for carrying us. We can take it from here." But nah. Instead, Emma called me up, all thrilled, and asked if I could also help pay for the wedding. I recall sitting on my couch that night, phone in hand, staring at the wall, thinking, is this real? When I finally managed to say something, it went like this, Emma. I already send you $900 every month. I can't give any more. She went silent for a good 10 minutes. She seemed surprised that I would say no. I felt like a bastard for refusing to sponsor their extravagant wedding after years of paying their bills. The call ended abruptly, and I sat there thinking of all the things I could have done with the money. A down payment on a house turned into a nicer car than my my '05 Civic, which wheezes in the rain. Instead of languishing in my flat for my 1 week off, I took a nice trip. Yeah, forget it. But whatever. I assumed she would understand. I expected Tyler to stand up and handle his own wedding like a grown man, but he did not. Fast forward a few months until my father's birthday at my grandmother's place. It's a big family thing. Lots of food. Kids are racing around everywhere. Everyone is debating about who produced the greatest BBQ sauce, like they do every year. Emma and Tyler arrived looking quite joyful. They seemed carefree. The strange thing is, they arrived in a beautiful new Jeep Cherokee. For example, the dealer tags were still present. I knew when I went outside to get another soda from the cooler. I paused and stared at it. Tyler noticed me and approached. "Sweet ride," he murmured, patting the hood as if he were in a car commercial. "Yeah. When did you receive this?" I inquired, trying not to seem like I was grilling him. He murmured something about a unique leasing arrangement at work before hastily changing the subject to how the Bears were likely to fail again this season. In my opinion, this is just nonsense. No way would a struggling couple be authorized for a new car lease. Then I realized Emma was wearing a sophisticated watch that I had never seen before. Nothing as pricey as a Rolex, but certainly not the $30 Target bargain she used to wear when my cousin Penny mentioned it at dinner. Emma simply said it was a fortuitous find from a pawn shop and winked at Tyler. Something fell off. If they were so broke, they'd require my $900 per month. How do they afford all this new stuff? I tried to calculate the math in my head. Even with both of their jobs, less their mortgage costs and my unpaid loan, they should not have enough money for brand new automobiles and jewelry. But I shoved the thought aside. Perhaps I was simply jealous or something. Later that night, while retrieving some ice from the garage freezer, I overheard Tyler discussing an investment he had made that was paying off handsomely with my Uncle Rick. They were standing just around the corner, and Tyler was talking about getting in on the ground floor and already seeing significant returns. When I walked around the corner with my eyes, Tyler stopped talking and began chatting about football, a very noticeable switch-up. Uncle Rick was uncomfortable, as if he'd been caught chatting about someone on the way home from the party. I could not quit thinking about it. The new car, the watch, and the quiet chat about investments for people who ostensibly required my assistance to pay their basic needs. They seemed to be doing well with the extras. I even texted Darren, who works at the Jeep dealership. "Hey dude, how much does a new Cherokee cost these days?" The answer almost drove me off the road. Even with the greatest lease agreement, they'd be paying at least $400 each month. Where the hell did that money come from? However, I still gave them the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they'd been lucky somehow. Perhaps one of them had received a raise and was too ashamed to tell me about it, because they would have to declare that they no longer needed my money. Tyler might have won some money gaming or something. A week later, Emma contacted me, asking if I could send the next month's money a few days early due to an unexpected expense. I sent it without asking questions, but I included everything. Okay, she simply responded with all good. Now the ex-bro, and that was all. That Sunday, I was looking through Instagram when I noticed Emma had shared photos from her weekend trip to Nashville, a fancy hotel room, nice eateries, tickets for a country music concert. I sat there staring at my phone, feeling like an absolute idiot. I was eating ramen in my terrible apartment while they were having fun in Nashville with my money. But perhaps there was an explanation, correct? Perhaps the vacation was a gift from someone. Perhaps they had been saving for months, but doubts had clearly crept in. And once they arrived, I started seeing other things. Two small comments here and there. The way they changed the conversation anytime money was mentioned around me. Tyler's smirk, when I mentioned being short on funds, prompted me to pay closer attention if anything suspicious was going on. I was going to sort everything out, but things were showing themselves without my help. Like one Thursday night, I was having coffee with a guy who works for the same construction company as Tyler. I will call him Carson. Just having a talk. I inquired as to whether the company was doing well. Carson sipped his beer and responded, "Hell yeah. They just handed everyone incentives after the large hospital deal was approved. Tyler has been talking about this for several weeks. I almost choked on my beer bonus." "How much are we talking about?" Carson shrugged. "I'm not sure exactly, but he stated it was enough to finally start that investing portfolio." His financial advisor advised. He kept showing everyone an app on his phone with stocks and shit. Portfolio of investments made by financial advisors, while I was sending them $900 so of my hard-earned money each month, while working extra hours and dining like a destitute college student. "When did he get the bonus?" I asked, attempting to sound nonchalant. "I do not know. Like 4 months ago. Perhaps 5. Everyone in the crew received one. 5 months of still abusing me by stealing my money while waiting on a bonus. I spent 5 months sweating my ass off for extra shifts, while they met with financial consultants. The next day, I called my grandmother and asked if I might come over and help her with some yard work. She's becoming elderly and has problems lifting heavy items. Plus, I was curious what she thought. So, when we were pulling weeds, I casually mentioned Emma's and Tyler's finances. Grandma became quite quiet. Then she rose up, dusted her hands, and said, "Come in, Jake. There is something you should know." We sat at her kitchen table, and she looked me directly in the eyes. "They have been lying to you, dear. And not only small white lies. Emma and Tyler, according to Granny, had been talking to the rest of the family about this incredible investment opportunity they had discovered approximately 2 years ago. Some kind of real estate development transaction that made a lot of money every quarter. The issue is, it was originally intended for me. Grandma stated that your Uncle Pete had told Tyler about it first. But Tyler persuaded him that you wouldn't be interested because you were bad with money and didn't see the chance. Then they spend the money you've sent them on themselves." I just sat there, feeling like someone had sucker struck me for 2 years. They'd been profiting off an investment intended for me, while I'd been sending them my hard-earned money the entire time. "There is more," Grandma continued, her voice becoming angrier. "I had never seen her like this before. They laugh at you. Jake calls you their personal ATM. Say you're too dumb to figure it out. Emma even informed your cousin Penny that as long as they pretended to be broke, you would continue to send the money." I couldn't believe what I heard. My own sister had been stealing from me, lying to me, and ridiculing me behind my back for years. "Why didn't someone inform me?" I inquired, my tone barely above a whisper. Grandmother sighed. "We assumed you knew. Emma explained that you were only assisting them while they worked on their investment plan. It wasn't until last month, when she boasted about how you were still providing them money, that I realized you had no idea." That night, I went home and pulled up all of my bank statements from the previous 4 years. Nearly $35,000. That's how much I had sent them. $35,000. That might have been in my investing account. That may have been a down payment on my home. That could have gotten me out of my terrible apartment with the neighbors who fight at 3 a.m. I spent the next 2 days exploring deeper. Another friend informed me that Tyler had quit his construction job months ago and was now full-time handling their finances. Meanwhile, Emma was still working as a receptionist at the dentist's office, but she was continually taking days off to go shopping with the girls. And the entire time, I was busting my ass at the welding shop, working extra to make ends meet while still sending them money. Do you know how hot a welding shop gets in the midst of the summer? With faulty air conditioning, do you lose 5 pounds and sweat every shift? That is the type of employment I was doing to support their lifestyle. I opted not to explode or cause a scene. I was going to handle this as an adult. So, like clockwork, I waited for the first of the month. Emma asked for the money. "Hey, Jake," she remarked casually, as if we'd just talked yesterday. "Just checking in. How is work going? Are things still chaotic at the shop?" "It's fine," I answered, keeping my tone neutral. Same old, same old." "That's fine," she said. not very interested. Then she explained why she was calling. Oh, could you send this month's money a little earlier? We are thinking of renovating the kitchen backsplash before the wedding. I nearly laughed. What about the kitchen backsplash? Really? I took a deep breath. Yeah, about that, I said. I'm currently experiencing financial difficulties. I will be unable to send anything this month. The stillness at the other end was deafening. Then, wait, you mean this month, correct? You're still helping us after that? I do not know, Emma. I've been paying your bills for 4 years. I believe it is time I concentrated on myself for a change. Maybe the first used my money for personal investments. I want to emphasize the last part. I was waiting to see if she would pick it up. The hush on the other end lasted even longer when she eventually spoke. Her tone had an edge to it. What is that intended to mean? It signifies I'm aware of the real estate bargain that was intended for me. The one you and Tyler have been profiting off while still collecting my money. Another prolonged stillness. She did not even attempt to dispute it. Jake, this is not what you believe. No, I shut her off. So you're not profiting from an investment that Uncle Pete advised Tyler about for me? You haven't been lying to me for years and laughing behind my back. Who told you this? Her voice was now harsh. Does it matter? Is this true? She didn't respond. I took a deep breath. I am done. Emma. No more money. Ever. You and Tyler may now live off your excellent investments. I hung up before she could reply. My hands were shaking, but it felt great. It was as if I had been carrying about 100 pounds of weight for 4 years and had finally let go. Emma called me right back. I did not pick up. She called again and again. I switched off my phone when I put it back on the next morning. I received 17 missed calls from Emma, 8 from Tyler, and over 30 text messages ranging from, "We need to chat to," "You two are making a major mistake," "I can't believe you'd do this to relatives." I blocked them all, and I felt free. That night, I celebrated by ordering pizza. A full pizza exclusively for me, with all the toppings I want. It was the first time in years that I had purchased something just because I wanted it, rather than because it was the cheapest alternative. 2 days later, Tyler arrived at my apartment. I did not let him in, simply chat to him through the chain door. "Jake, this is all a huge misunderstanding." He began attempting to sound nice. "Yes, we made that investment, but it wasn't intended for you particularly. Pete just said it to a group of folks." "Really?" I said. "And I assume you weren't laughing at me behind my back either." Tyler's face fell. People sometimes say dumb things while drinking. It did not signify anything. "Get out of here, Tyler!" I yelled, beginning to close the door. "I am done being your ATM." He placed his foot in the door. "Jake, you do not comprehend. We need the money. The investment. It's not doing so well right now. We're kind of counting on your assistance." I looked at him in bewilderment. "Are you serious? Despite what I now know, you are still trying to get money from me. It's only transitory," he insisted. "When the market recovers," I firmly pushed the door open, forcing his foot out. "I suppose you could have saved part of my money rather than purchasing new automobiles and watches." "Not my concern anymore." I slammed the door in his face, locking it via the door. I could hear him curse. "You are making a huge mistake, Jake. We are family." Yeah, they hadn't treated me like family. That night, I opened a savings account and deposited the $900 I planned to send to Emma, the first deposit of money. I told myself that was the first step in building my own future rather than funding theirs. A week after disconnecting them, I received a call from Uncle Pete. This was bizarre. We weren't very close. He's my father's younger brother, and he's always appeared more concerned with his business ventures than with family issues. "Jake, got a minute?" he asked. "I need to speak with you about something essential." We met at a little diner near my home. Pete was uneasy as he slid into the booth across from me, so I heard what happened to Emma and Tyler. He started stirring his coffee, despite the fact that he had not mentioned the money or the investment possibility. I simply nodded, waiting for him to continue. "I wasn't sure if he was checking me out or what," he said. "Look, I feel terrible about this," which surprised me. "That real estate transaction. I genuinely meant it for you. Tyler convinced me you weren't interested and were very cautious with your money. You said you informed him that investing was too dangerous for your blood. I should have spoken to you personally." "Yes, you should have," I agreed. Probably sharper than required, but come on. I was still pissed. Pete exhaled and ran his fingers through his hair. Well, I'm here to put things right. The first deal was only the beginning. We have a fresh opportunity coming up, even excellent as the original. This time, I want you to really get involved. I raised an eyebrow. Why should I trust you right now? Because I've cut Tyler out entirely, Pete replied strongly. When I learned what they did, I pulled some strings. They are not involved in any future deals. He slid a folder across the table. I have all of the material right here for you to peruse. Take it to a lawyer, if you wish. Seriously? The first opened the folder and scanned its contents. It seemed legit. My eyes widened as I saw the predictions for this commercial property development. We're talking about multifamily flats in a rapidly developing neighborhood just outside of the city. This is the real stuff, Pete said, tapping the papers. And I've already entered your name for a share. Consider it compensating for missed time. I scrutinized him, trying to determine whether I could trust him. The guy had never given me a reason not to trust him before, but I had previously trusted Emma, and see how it turned out. I'll think about it, I finally said, closing the folder. Pete nodded. That is fair. Just don't wait too long. We'll break ground next month. After he left, I asked a buddy who works in real estate to review the documents. I scanned and forwarded everything to him. He called me back that night. Dude, this is legitimate, he said. Exceptionally solid investment. The area is rapidly expanding, and these forecasts may be conservative. If I had the money, I'd invest in this myself. The following day, I made my decision. I called Pete and informed him that I was in. I cashed out my prior job's little 401k, which was only around $7,000 because I hadn't been able to contribute much while supporting Emma, and I put down every penny I'd saved since Emma and Tyler's payments stopped. It was risky, but sometimes you have to take chances. Pete promised to get all the papers ready. 3 days later, Emma called me from an unfamiliar number. So I did pick up. Jake, please, we need to chat, she implored. Her voice was different now, desperate. Things are awful, really terrible. The investment did not go well. We are late on our mortgage, and the wedding venue has threatened to cancel if we do not make a payment by Friday. That sounds difficult, I said, without giving any assistance. Jake, please. Her voice crackled. I understand that we made a mistake. I understand we wounded you, but we are very desperate here. Could you please help us one more time to get back on our feet? I laughed. You mean how I assisted you for 4 years while you stole investment possibilities from me and laughed behind my back? We are family, she whispered. I said, it's funny how you only remember that when you need something. Good luck with your challenges, Emma. I have my own investments to worry about right now. What investments? She asked harshly. Oh, Uncle Pete didn't tell you. He offered me a position in the new development, the one you and Tyler were booted out of. The silence was terrible then. You cannot be serious. Pete guaranteed us those slots. Not anymore, I replied, enjoying this more than I probably should have. It turns out he doesn't enjoy being lied to either. By Emma. I hung up and blocked the number too. The following day, my friend Carson from Tyler's former construction company called. Dude, you will not believe this. Tyler showed up today, begging for his job back. The boss urged him to get lost. Turns out he departed by telling everyone to screw themselves because he was financially secure. I couldn't help smiling. Their immaculate little world was collapsing, and all I had to do was cease supporting it. As the saying goes, sometimes the best retribution is to sit back and let karma take its course. My mom called around 2 weeks after I hung up with Emma. This was not rare. We communicated rather frequently, but her tone was different. Jake, she explained, I just got off the phone with your sister. She is not doing well. I exhaled. Mom, I know what you're going to say, but just hear me out, she interrupted. I am not asking you to give her money, not after what she'd done, but she's a disaster. Jake, she and Tyler are constantly fighting. The wedding has been postponed indefinitely. She says they may lose the house. Part of me wanted to reply, good, they deserved it. But I couldn't bring myself to be as severe, especially to my mother. Instead, I just said, I am sad to hear that. But this is no longer my problem. Mom was silent for a moment. I understand. And, for what it's worth, I believe you did the right thing by cutting them off. I just felt you should know what's going on. The next day, Granny called and invited me over for lunch. When I arrived, Mom served my favorite sandwich, turkey with all the fixings, and her homemade potato salad. That is basically the best thing ever. I heard Emma and Tyler are having problems. She spoke as we ate. I nodded. Mom told me. Good, Grandma answered, surprising me. Perhaps they will learn something from this. I stared at her. You aren't going to tell me I should aid them? She shook her head forcefully. Absolutely not. They took advantage of your goodwill for several years. Actions have consequences. She took a sip from her iced tea. Besides, I have something to tell you. I had a long conversation with Pete regarding that investment. Yeah? I inquired, curious. He says things are going even better than predicted. They've already received pledges for the majority of the units before they even break ground. That is excellent news. Yes, it is, she agreed. And I want you to know how proud I am of you, Jake, not only for sticking up for yourself, but also for how you handled the situation. There are no yelling bouts or any public dramas. You simply carried out your duties in silence. Hearing that from Grandma meant a lot. She has always been the wisest member of the family. Everyone seeks guidance from this individual. Then came the family feast. My mother hosts one every month or so, and I almost missed this one. I was worried Emma and Tyler would be there, making things unpleasant. But Mom assured me that they had other ideas. So, I went. What I didn't anticipate was Emma appearing nonetheless. Alone. She looked dreadful just as we were finishing our dessert. Her hair was pulled up into a sloppy bun. She did not have her typical neatly styled waves. No makeup. She had dark circles beneath her eyes. She was wearing an old sweatshirt that I knew from her college days. I apologize for being late, she murmured and avoided making eye contact with anyone, particularly me. Mom jumped up. Emma? I assumed you couldn't make it. Allow me to fix you a dish. The rest of us sat together in uneasy quiet. I concentrated on my pie, moving the remaining few crumbs about with my fork. Emma only took a half-hearted bite of the food her mother offered her. Then, out of nowhere, she looked up at me. Tyler moved out, she exclaimed, her eyes watery and shit. The table became silent. I kept my face perfectly neutral, refusing to fall for the compassion trap. He blamed me for wrecking our future by pissing you off, she continued, her voice cracking exactly, as if she had practiced it. Said that if I hadn't been so greedy, we'd still be receiving your money every month. I raised an eyebrow. So it's your fault that he lied to me for years, not the fact that you both stole from me and laughed at it. She looked down at her plate. She's doing that thing where she pushes food around to look unhappy. Classic. Emma moves. We've been doing it since we were kids, when she wanted to avoid trouble. No, it was both of us. But he is. He's not who I thought he was. Not kidding, my Uncle Rick murmured, drawing a scowl from my mother. Emma continued with a small sniff. I just wanted to let you know that I am sorry. I sincerely apologize. What we did was terrible, and I do not expect you to forgive me or support me in any way. I just wanted to say it correctly. She simply needed to say it. It wasn't because she needed a place to stay or money. Yes, the manipulation was clear. The timing of the apologies soon after Tyler departed, the tears that appeared on command, and her constant glance at Mom to ensure she was watching the entire act. Thank you for stating that, I finally responded, keeping my voice bland. I admire your sentiment. The remainder of the supper was tense. Emma left early, explaining that she had an early shift the next day. Translation: her guilt trip failed. Therefore, she was cutting her losses. After she left, my mother turned to me. She will return home next week, according to her mother. Just until she figures everything out. They appear to be selling the house too far underwater on the mortgage. Of course, she was returning home. The free ride had ended, and she needed a new host. At home, I opened my email and found a message from Pete, providing an update on the investment. Things were moving even faster than anticipated. They had obtained the necessary permissions and were commencing construction 2 weeks ahead of schedule. The predicted return was now significantly higher than previously estimated. Everything was going well for me. After 6 months, my life had dramatically transformed. Pete's real estate bargain was even better than imagined. We sold the development pre-construction for almost twice the estimated profit. My initial investment had grown many times over. I did not go crazy with the money or anything. There's no Ferrari in the driveway, but I did make a down payment on a little house closer to work. Nothing extravagant, just a two-bedroom home with a nice yard. But it is mine. For the first time in years, I was not simply surviving, I was prospering. Then one night, my phone vibrated. I didn't recognize the number, but I had a horrible feeling about it. I let it go to voicemail. A minute later, a notification appeared. I pressed play immediately, bracing myself. Jake, I have no idea what to do anymore. I have lost everything. I've messed up my life so severely, and I have no one. I know I don't deserve your support after everything, but I'm terrified. Please. I'm not even concerned about money. I only need my brother right now. Mom's house is filled, and I have nowhere else to go. I don't recognize my own life anymore. Tyler has gone. The home is gone. All I worked for, all I thought I owned. It's just gone. I can't do this alone. Thank you, Jake. Please do not turn your back on me. I stared at the phone. She still had the courage. I would give her that. I could imagine her sitting in her car, rehearsing the perfect balance of melancholy and humility to make this sound sincere. But I was not buying it. I deleted the voicemail with no second thought. Then followed the text. Emma, Jake, I am serious. I've got nowhere to go. Please, just a couch. That's all I need right now. I wouldn't ask unless I was desperate. I left my phone face up on the coffee table while I completed my dinner. For the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty. None. She squandered away years of my help. They laughed at me behind my back. I built an entire life on my money and expected me not to notice. And now she was facing actual consequences. That was no longer my problem. She was not my duty. A few hours later, my mother called Jake. Have you spoken to Emma? I exhaled. Yeah. She left me a voicemail and several texts. Mom hesitated, and I already knew what was going to happen. She's definitely struggling. Honey, she knows I shut her off. Jake. No, Mom, I'm done with her. She burnt the bridge, and now she can swim. She owned a house. She had money. She had a fiancé, and she squandered everything away because she became greedy. She picked this. Mom remained quiet for a long time. Then she sighed. I understand, and you are correct. But she is still your sister. I clenched my jaw. No, Mom. She was my sister. But my sister would not have taken from me for 4 years, would not have laughed behind my back, wouldn't have only come crawling back after losing everything Emma had. She's gone. More quietness than quiet. Okay, I understand. That was the last time I mentioned Emma. She did not text again. I did not call again. Maybe she knew she'd used up every ounce of my goodwill. Perhaps she finally realized she had reached the end of the line. Life continued on. The second development with Pete was even greater than the first. I completed my certification and was promoted at work. I started seeing a cool girl named Alicia, who works as an office manager at one of our development locations. What is the best part? Every night, I sleep soundly since I know I'm no longer being played. Sometimes removing toxic people from your life is the best investment you can make. Story 3. This tale is titled, My Wife Swapped Our IVF Embryo for Her Zeus, so I swapped her out of my life. So, I'm sitting here at 3 a.m. I'm typing this on my phone because I can't sleep, and I'm hoping some of you can learn something from the total train wreck my life has become. Warning, this is going to be a long one. I'm Jack, 32, and up until a few months ago, I felt I had a very good life with my wife, Emma, 31, a woman. We had the house in a nice neighborhood, producing good money and pleasing everyone on the outside. We were that pair who seemed to have it together. You know the type? We even had a gigantic Maine Coon cat named Thor, who was like our first child. Every night, a huge orange fluff ball would sleep on my breast and attack my feet at 5:30 a.m., as if by clockwork. Emma always claimed Thor was more my cat than hers. She was not mistaken. He'd follow me around the house like a dog and sit in the bathroom sink as I prepared for work. We had been trying to have a child for the past 2 years. 2 freaking years. Initially, it was exciting. Like, hey, babe, tonight could be the night. But after months of negative results, it just became a gloomy cloud hovering over us. Each month was the same. Hope, disappointment, silence, repeat. We just sat there without talking. Because, what was there to say? Good luck next time. Yes, right. I recall this one night after another negative test. Emma just sat on the bathroom floor, crying. I wasn't sure what to say anymore. All of our friends were having children and sharing lovely family photos on Instagram, while we were locked in a never-ending cycle of despair. After a battery of testing, the physicians were unable to identify anything notably wrong with either of us. Just one of those unexplained infertility cases that frustrates you because there is nothing you can do to help. Emma proposed IVF one night. Her voice was trembling when she said, "This is our best chance." I did not even hesitate. I answered, yes, immediately because I assumed we were in this together. You know? I mean, isn't that what marriage is all about? A team. The financial effect was severe. Insurance only covered a portion of it. So we dug into our savings. But I assumed it would be worthwhile in the end. We would finally have a family. She took over the IVF process, saying I was already stressed from work and that she would manage all of the appointments. It was just ordinary things. She'd claim the clinic would call if they needed anything urgent, and I absolutely trusted her. When we went in for the embryo transfer, I attended a few critical appointments. I was immediately there, holding her hand, as the doctor explained everything. I recall thinking this was a great occasion, the start of our family. I even took a picture of us in the clinic room to commemorate the day our children's lives began. Everything appeared to be in order the first few months after the treatment was completed. Emma was finally pregnant. Morning sickness wasn't too awful, so we started converting the extra room into a nursery. I painted the entire thing myself over the weekend. Thor continued to help by going through the paint tray and then across the carpet, so that was enjoyable to clean up. We even agreed that we didn't want to know the gender. I wanted it to be a surprise. Emma had names selected for either option. We were making plans, building a future. At least that is what I assumed we were doing. Her pregnancy was progressing smoothly. She had reached the 5-month mark and was finally showing for real. Not just the is she pregnant or did she have a big lunch? Kind of displaying. I was getting more thrilled about becoming a father with each passing week. I had a list of dad jokes ready to go and everything. I started putting up the crib one night, and the directions could have been written in ancient Egyptian. Things took me around 3 hours in a YouTube instruction to figure things out. Thor kept jumping into the box and attacking the small Allen wrench. Not helpful, buddy. At this point, I was doing all these tiny things to get ready. Reading the What to Expect books Emma purchased, and downloading apps that tell you how big the baby is each week. Your baby is now about the size of an avocado. All the things that first-time dads do. Then one random Tuesday night, I was going through some tedious insurance paperwork, just to make sure everything was covered for the delivery. Emma had already fallen asleep, and I was at the kitchen table, Thor purring in my lap, sorting through all of the medical documents and bills we'd accumulated. That's when I saw something strange. A sperm donor ID that was not mine. Not my name. This is not my clinic patient number. Some very different code. At first, I assumed I was simply weary and misreading it, but I double-checked it and compared it to my own patient number on another form. No match. That was the moment. Everything in my chest became chilly. I convinced myself it had to be a mistake. The clinic most likely simply made a mistake with the paperwork. There's no chance this was true, right? I mean, Emma would not. She could not. I did not sleep that night. I just lay there staring at the ceiling, wondering whether I still knew who she was. The next morning, I waited until my wife left for work, before driving directly to the IVF center. I recall waiting in the parking lot for about 20 minutes, trying to work up the nerve to walk inside, because deep down, I believe I already knew. When I eventually came in, the receptionist gave me a strange look, but I kept my calm, remained courteous, and simply asked for information. Hi, I was going over some documentation for my wife's treatment when I saw something peculiar. Could you please confirm which embryo was used for our procedure? The receptionist, Melissa, as her name tag said, grinned and began typing away on her computer. Then I noticed her face shift, that small frown, a small head tilt. My stomach plummeted before she even spoke. That's strange, she observed, squinting at her computer. It appears that the embryo used was not the one originally assigned to your case. My heart pounded in my ears. What do you mean? It appears that a donor specimen was used instead. She looked up at me with a puzzled expression. However, that should have required your signed authorization. I just stared at her, trying to hold my voice calm. I've never signed anything. She rechecked the file. It indicates here that your wife approved the change. Everything inside me became chilly. So you swapped embryos without consulting with me? Her face turned white. That is not intended to happen. We have policies in place to avoid this. Then describe how that happened, I said, trying not to lose my composure in the waiting room. She started babbling about getting a supervisor, but I was already on my way out the door. I needed to address Emma. Now. I called my boss on the way home. I told him I had a family emergency. He didn't ask any questions, so I must have sounded as messed up as I felt. I was just told to take whatever time I needed. I drove way too quickly. My mind is racing with a million thoughts. By the time I pulled into our driveway, I was shivering with wrath. I recall thinking as I inserted my key into the door that this would be the tipping point in my life. Everything before and after this point. And I was correct. I entered the house and closed the door behind me. Thor rushes from his window perch, as if I had just set off a firecracker. Poor dude despised loud noises. I expected Emma to be at work, but she was sitting on our couch, crying. Her face was red and puffy, and she wiped her eyes with shaky hands. I barely got it inside when she told me you headed to the IVF clinic. It was not even a question. That's when I understood it wasn't a mistake. She understood exactly what I had discovered. I stood there staring at her, not saying anything. I was scared that if I started talking, I might yell. And I've never been a yeller. My friend Olivia works there, she whispered. She texted me that you had questions. She informed me you were upset. I tightened my jaw so tightly that it hurt. Is that the same friend who helped you swap the embryos? She drew in a breath, her entire body flinching. That was everything I needed to see. She understood exactly what she had done. Why? My voice came out icy cold. I didn't recognize it as mine. She massaged her face and looked anywhere but at me. She reached for my hand once, and I backed back as if she was about to hand me a snake. You would not comprehend. She finally spoke, still not addressing my gaze. I only wanted the best for our child. I wanted robust and healthy genes. Meaning? She hesitated before saying, I used an anonymous donor from the clinic's database. Someone having better genetic characteristics. I felt like my gut had been pounded harder than mine. I laughed not because anything was humorous, but because this wasn't simply a betrayal. This was insane. The donor has no family history of cardiovascular disease or cancer. She hurried to explain. He's tall, athletic, and holds a doctorate in biochemistry. I wanted to give our baby the finest possible start. Do you know what is wrong? My father had a mild heart issue. Nothing serious. All I needed was medication. Emma realized she was essentially suggesting my family's genes weren't good enough for her. So you decided, without notifying me, to remove me from our child's life. And you thought it was your decision? She stood up with her arms protectively wrapped about her belly. It is still our baby, Jack. You'll remain the father in every aspect that matters. Except for being the parent, I shot back. Except for the fact that you lied to me for months. Except for the point where you went behind my back and made this major choice without consulting me. Thor had crept back into the room and was sitting in the corner, wide-eyed, watching us. Even the cat realized this was awful. I was attempting to do what was best for our family, she explained, her voice shaking. I assumed you would understand if only I knew what I found out after the baby was delivered. When were you going to tell me, Emma? Or were you hoping I wouldn't find out? That I had reared a stranger's child as if it were my own? She did not respond to it, which was an answer in itself. I ran my hands through my hair, trying to concentrate. Olivia, your clinic friend, has just helped you commit fraud. Because that's what it is. You fabricated my agreement. You misled on medical records. Emma's eyes widened. It was not like that. Olivia only assisted with the paperwork. She didn't forge anything, correct? She just conveniently failed to collect my signature before exchanging my sperm for some unknown donor. There was a prolonged hush. Emma kept opening her mouth as if she had something to say, then close it again. She finally sat back down, shoulders drooping. I thought I was doing the correct thing. I actually did. I took my keys off the countertop. I need to get out of here. I need to think. Where are you going? Her voice was little. Anywhere except here, she yelled out to me as I was about to leave. Jack, please. We can work through it. We are having a baby. I turned back to face her. No, Emma. You are having a baby. I am apparently merely the man who is supposed to pay for it. I took Thor's carrier from the closet, snatched him up despite his objections, and tossed some of his food into a bag. There was no way I was leaving him behind. Are you taking the cat? She inquired incredulously. Yeah, I am taking the cat. At least he is mine. I walked out without knowing where I was heading. I knew I couldn't stay there another minute without saying something I couldn't take back. It wasn't until I was halfway down the block that the gravity of the situation hit me. Everything I thought I had, everything I created, was all a lie. Thor meowed from his carrier in the passenger seat, his small paws pressed against the mesh, as if he was trying to figure out what was going on. Yes, buddy. Same. I informed him that it's just you and me now. I feel like an idiot for chatting to my cat. But, honestly, at the time, he was the only family I had left. I drove around for hours with no particular destination, just me and Thor wandering the streets, trying to figure out how my life had disintegrated in one day. I eventually found myself at my friend Mark's house, without even calling first, simply showing up at his door with a cat carrier and probably looking like I'd seen a ghost. Dude, what the hell was Mark's welcome as he opened the door? He then took one glance at my face and said, "Shit, get in here." I gave him the brief explanation as he retrieved both of our beers from his fridge. His reaction was very much as expected. Lots of what the cuss. And what did she do? Jen, Mark's girlfriend, arrived home when I was in the middle of a narrative and instantly went into crisis mode, setting up the spare room for me and bringing Thor a makeshift litter box. I believe I was still in shock, so I simply let them handle everything while I sat on their couch staring at nothing. That night, I could not sleep. I lay there in their guest bed, Thor purring on my chest. I shut off my phone when Emma called for the 8th time. I just couldn't handle any more lies. The following morning, I called my lawyer. I will call her Vanessa. She's a fierce woman who helped my brother get through his divorce a few years ago. When she inquired what was going on, I explained everything. "What happens to the baby if I abandon her now?" I asked. She examined my case and scowled. "You are legally presumed the father because you are married, unless you contest paternity in court. If you do not dispute the case quickly, you may still be obligated to pay child support, even if you are not biologically entitled." I almost vomited right there in her office. Emma had almost ensnared me permanently. What if I can establish she committed fraud? Vanessa taps her pen on the desk. That alters everything. If we can prove she intentionally deceived you, you will not be held financially liable. But we need concrete proof. The documentation provided by fertility clinics is helpful. But, preferably, she should admit it on the record or in writing. And our assets. Move them now. If she files first, she can argue for half of the total. I had a lot to comprehend, but something about Emma's story bothered me. The anonymous donor has impeccable genes. Things appeared to be convenient. Too convenient. Can we obtain the real donor records from the clinic? I asked. Vanessa nodded. We can try. They will oppose it on privacy grounds, but given the circumstances, we may have a chance. What are your thoughts? I believe my wife is still lying to me. Over the next several days, I started putting my shit together. The first thing I did was withdraw the majority of our money from our joint accounts, leaving just enough so she wouldn't notice it was gone. Probably not the most ethical decision, but at the time, I wasn't feeling particularly ethical. I relocated all of my critical documents to Mark's house, including my birth certificate, passport, and the deed to my car. I even contacted the credit card providers to prevent any new charges on our pooled cards. Emma kept phoning and texting, saying things like, "Please come home because we need to talk about this, and I still love you." I ignored most of it, sending only one SMS stating that I needed space. Meanwhile, Vanessa was striving to gain access to the donor records. The clinic fought it, alleging patient confidentiality, but the judge was sympathetic to my case. Fraud, it appears, will do so on the 5th day of staying at Mark's. I finally agreed to meet Emma in a coffee shop. Neutral territory, a public area where I could keep my cool. I arrived early and chose a table in the corner. When she walked in, I nearly didn't recognize her. She looked awful. She sat across from me, hands on the table, and quickly reached for mine. I pulled back. "Jack, please," she started. "I acknowledge that I made a mistake. I understand you're upset, but we can work things out." "What specifically has to be fixed?" I asked. "The fact that you lied to me for several months. You determined that my genetics were not suitable for our child." She flinched. "That is not what it was about. I only wanted the best for our baby." "Yes, you mentioned that. However, this is the story of an anonymous benefactor. Is this even true?" Her gaze shifted away for a fleeting second. Bingo. Of course it is true, she said, but her voice had a little tremor that indicated she was lying. I leaned forward. Emma, who exactly is it? Because I will find out one way or another. That coffee shop meeting came to nothing. Emma maintained her anonymous donor story despite my catching her in the lie. We left with nothing settled, except that I was even more convinced she was hiding something significant. I returned to Mark's house, where Thor was living his finest life, being indulged by Jen, who kept giving him snacks when she thought I wasn't watching. In the midst of the chaos, at least one person was joyful. For the next week, I was essentially living two lives. During the day, I'd go to work and pretend everything was fine when colleagues inquired about Emma and the baby. Then I had to meet with Vanessa or spend hours recording everything I could regarding our finances and the IVF process. I even drove back to the house one day when I knew Emma had a pregnancy appointment. It seemed strange using my own key to sneak into my own home, but I needed to get some more clothes and see if there was anything else I should take. That was when I discovered Emma's laptop. She always kept it password protected, but I knew hers. She used the same 3 for everything and asked me to write them down once when she forgot. This is a classic Emma move, being secretive, but also disorganized. I paused for about 2 seconds before logging in. Normally, I wouldn't dig through someone's private information, but that changed when she started to lie about our children's paternity. At first, I did not find much. Simply work emails, Amazon orders, and pregnancy forums. I then accessed her email's trash folder. I discovered deleted conversations between Emma and her buddy Olivia from the clinic that went back nearly a year. They were planning the entire affair, with Olivia informing Emma when she'd be working so she could handle the paperwork. Emma asked if it was truly possible to use a different donor without my knowledge. However, the actual thing was an email thread with someone named Ryan. The topic line read, "Are you certain about this?" My stomach dropped as I opened it and began reading. Ryan Matthews, her college boyfriend, the one she dated for 4 years before I met her, was someone she used to bring up now and then when discussing her past. She would occasionally visit his Facebook profile to see what he was up to. Initially, the emails were cordial, catching up. "How has your life been? What type of item is that?" Then Emma addressed our reproductive issues and how she'd been thinking a lot about him lately, and how they'd always talked about having children together in college. Then I noticed the text, and my gut twisted. I informed him that she was utilizing his sperm from when he gave it to the clinic years ago. Apparently, he was a regular donor in medical school to supplement his income. How did he respond? Surprised, but not angry. He inquired whether I knew and was fine with it. Emma bluntly told him, "Jack does not need to know. What he doesn't know will not harm him." I snapped pictures of everything on my phone. My hands were shaking so much that several of the images turned out blurry. I forwarded important emails to my own account, then erased the forwarded items from her sent folder and cleared her trash again. I felt like throwing up the entire time. It wasn't just some ideal genes donor. It was her ex-boyfriend. She wanted his baby, not mine. I must have sat there for 20 minutes, staring at the wall after closing the laptop. Everything is made obvious now. The secrecy and lies. Why did she insist on handling all of the IVF appointments herself? When I returned to Mark's apartment, I sent everything to Vanessa. She called me very immediately. "This affects everything," she explained. "This demonstrates premeditation and purposeful dishonesty. The judge will have a field day with this. What are our next steps?" I inquired, feeling strangely peaceful amidst the pandemonium. "We keep gathering evidence and eventually find this Ryan man." It was not difficult to find him. Ryan Matthews is a physical therapist who works at a facility about 30 minutes from our home. I searched him up online and instantly recognized him from photos Emma had showed me years before. Tall, athletic build. He's the type of person who most likely participated in collegiate sports. The type of guy who donates sperm because clinics pay more for tall athletic donors. I scheduled an appointment under a false identity, probably not the most ethical option. However, ethics were no longer my first focus. The expression on his face when I went into his treatment room was rather than the Mark Johnson he expected. Priceless. It was pure shock. Then recognition. Then something that resembled guilt. "Jack," he stated, frozen in place. "What are you doing here?" I closed the door behind me. "I believe you understand exactly why I'm here." To his credit, he did not attempt to dispute anything. He sat down heavily on his stool and ran his hand through his hair. She informed me you had consented to it. He said it finally. Said you two had discussed utilizing a donor and were fine with it being me. Do you believe that? That I would be fine with my wife having her ex-boyfriend's baby? He winced and looked back. No, this does not make sense. However, Emma has the ability to persuade. Tell me about it, I mumbled. For what it's worth, I didn't realize she was lying to you. I would not have consented if I had known. I wasn't sure whether I believed him, but it didn't matter. The damage was done. So what happens now? He asked. Are you planning to punch me or something? I nearly laughed. I just wanted to see if you would lie to me as she did. I turned to leave, but then paused. One more thing. Did you two reconnect before or after we started trying to have a baby? He looked perplexed earlier. I believe she contacted out about 3 years ago. She said she was in town and wanted to get some coffee. We've stayed in touch on and off since then. 3 years? We spent the entire time planning our family. She laid the groundwork for this. I nodded and walked away, feeling as if the final piece of the puzzle had been completed. I drove about for hours, attempting to digest everything. The treachery was deeper than I had anticipated. This wasn't just Emma making a bad decision regarding genetics. Emma had been scheming for years to have her ex's baby while married to me. I finally returned to Mark's apartment after midnight. He and Jen were already asleep, but Thor was waiting at the door. As if he knew I needed companionship, I grabbed him up and sat on the guest bed, petting him while I considered what to do next. The next morning, I called Vanessa to tell her about my talk with Ryan. This is gold, she stated, but we need more. Can you get Emma to admit anything in writing? Text messages, emails, or anything else? So I did something that I am not proud of. I texted Emma that I wanted to speak things through and that I might be overreacting about the anonymous donor situation. I told her I was willing to listen if she was honest with me. She answered instantly, clearly relieved that I was coming around. We decided to meet at our place that evening. Before leaving, I had one final talk with Vanessa. We discussed how I planned to preserve my assets and future. She had already prepared the divorce paperwork, just needed my final approval. When I arrived, Emma had clearly gone to great lengths to make the place look pleasant. The house, she had prepared my favorite supper, even placed flowers on the table. As if we were settling a minor disagreement. Jack, she said, coming to hug me as I went in. I allowed her to hug me, but I did not reciprocate. I have missed you so much. We need to talk, I said, not sitting down, despite her gesture toward the dining table. She had said, yes, of course, she replied quickly. I want to explain everything. Good, because I have some questions, I said, bringing out my phone and pressing record. I began recording. So tell me more about this donor. The nameless person is wearing the ideal pants. She launched into the same spiel she had told previously about wanting the best genetic profile and making the decision out of love for our future kid. I let her continue and then responded, there's no other reason you chose this particular donor. She paused for just a second. What do you mean? I mean, is there anything else about him that influenced your decision to choose him? Another pause. No, only the health profile. I nodded slowly. So it has nothing to do with Ryan Matthews. Her face lost its color. What? I viewed the emails. Emma, I spoke to Ryan. I know everything. She began crying. Then came the big, dramatic sobs, which made me want to cure whatever was wrong. Now they've made me enraged. It's not as you think, she sobbed. Really? Because I believe you purposely selected your ex-boyfriend's sperm. Olivia, your friend, was bypassing clinic protocols. He lied to me for months and intended to let me raise another man's child without ever telling me the truth. Isn't that what occurred? She kept crying and repeating she was sorry, that she had never meant to hurt me. How could we still be a family? I switched off the recording. I had everything I needed. I'm filing for divorce. I spoke, my voice remarkably steady. I've already moved most of my belongings out. You can keep the stuff, but the home is mine, and I plan to sell it. You can't do that, she murmured, appearing worried. I am pregnant. Where am I meant to go? That sounds like a problem for you and Ryan to work out. He does not want anything to do with the baby, she virtually yelled. He's just donated sperm. He's not ready to become a father. I nearly laughed. So, neither am I. At least not for this kid. Thor selected that moment to meow loudly from his carrier near the entryway. I had brought him to fetch the rest of his belongings. She yelled and cried. Jack, please. I know I messed up, but I still love you. We can work through it. I turned to face her. Really? Look at her. Maybe for the final time as her spouse. No, Emma. You do not love me. You enjoy the stability I bring. Your infant needs a house and a father figure. If you truly loved me, you would not have done this. I grabbed Thor's carrier and headed out the door. I will have my lawyer contact you regarding the divorce proceedings, I said without looking back. Do not call me anymore. As I walked to my car, one experienced a strange combination of emotions. Anger obviously hurts, but also relief. It was as if I had finally torn loose an anchor that had been dragging me down. Saw me again from his carrier. I know, buddy. I told him. Let's go home. Our genuine home. That night, I sent the recording to Vanessa. She responded almost instantly. Perfect, she admitted. Enough. We'll move forward tomorrow. The next several weeks were a blur of legal meetings, paperwork, and preparation. Vanessa filed divorce proceedings, as well as a motion to show that I was not Emma's biological father. Meanwhile, Emma was bombarding my phone with messages that ranged from urgent apologies to angry accusations. You're abandoning me when I need you the most. And I cannot believe you are being so harsh. And my personal favorite, it's still your baby in every aspect that counts. I blocked her number after that. Mark and Jen allowed me to remain with them while I looked for a new place. I discovered a great apartment that welcomed cats and was not too far from work. The most difficult thing was dealing with friends and family who didn't know the full story. Emma had allegedly been telling people that I had a mental breakdown and abandoned her while she was pregnant. Some people believed her, which revealed who my true friends were. My parents were firmly on my side. Once I described what had happened, my mother cried when I told her she wouldn't be getting the grandchild we'd all been hoping for. My father just put his hand on my shoulder and said, "You're doing the right thing, son." When the court day arrived, Vanessa showed the emails, messages, recorded conversation, and clinic testimony regarding procedure violations. She also had Ryan's statement, which confirmed Emma had misled him regarding my knowledge and consent. Every time Emma's counsel attempted to portray me as the villain for abandoning my pregnant wife, the judge simply looked at the evidence folder and raised an eyebrow. And every time Emma's lawyer tried to intervene, the judge raised her hand. I've seen a lot in this courtroom, but this amount of dishonesty is astonishing. Vanessa had foreseen the outcome of the final decision. A divorce was granted. I was not legally accountable for the child. Emma received nothing from our combined assets because the fraud was plainly established. Given the proof of dishonesty, Mr. Wilson's assets are his sole property. Miss S. Wilson will receive no monetary settlement from this divorce, the judge said. Furthermore, because Mr. Wilson is not the biological father, the court respects his right to withdraw any paternal claims to the kid. He will not be financially responsible for child support. Emma's counsel submitted one final request for consideration due to her vulnerable status as an expectant mother. The judge quickly shut it down. Miss S. Wilson intentionally deceived her husband, changed medical procedures without his approval, and faked financial documents. No additional compensation will be provided. A single tap of the gavel. Case closed. Emma simply sat there, frozen. Her lawyer shut his briefcase without saying a word. I stood, buttoned up my suit jacket, and walked out without looking back. Outside the courthouse, I took my deepest breath in months. It was finally over. That happened 6 months ago. Now, I'm still in my flat, however. I'm considering buying a tiny house with a yard so Thor can watch birds. He's doing well, by the way. I am currently sleeping on the keyboard as I try to type this. I removed all of my social media for a period to avoid the turmoil. When I got back online, I learned that Emma had returned to her hometown to live with her folks. The infant was born last month. According to common friends who continue to communicate with her, it is a boy. I try to avoid thinking about it. Looking back, I'm still shocked at how quickly someone I thought I knew so well could become a stranger. I married Emma, and she did this to me. They cannot be the same individual, right? But they are. And I didn't notice it until it was almost too late. If there's one takeaway here, it's that you never truly know someone. Even after years of being together, people may still surprise you in the worst ways. However, you are stronger than you realize. 6 months ago, I felt my life had ended. Now I'm doing okay. Not amazing, but not bad. Just okay, and sometimes okay is enough. Hey, Reddit, this is Jack again. I wasn't intending on updating, but something crazy happened last weekend that I wanted to share. I'm at home, watching the game with Thor, when someone starts hammering on my door. I open it and find Emma standing there with her parents and brother Mike, holding the baby. They force their way into my home before I can stop them. Emma's mother immediately starts with, "It's time you accepted responsibility for your son. I am like my son. We both know that's not my child. Remember this court case? DNA evidence? Ryan Matthews is your ex-boyfriend, and you utilized his sperm." Mike gets in my face, claiming Ryan left town 3 months ago. I was completely ghosted. Emma, he quit his work. I deleted social media. He is not paying any child support. That's unfortunate for her, I respond. But it has nothing to do with me. Emma begins crying, bouncing the cranky baby. I made a dreadful mistake, Jack. Her father comes in with some BS about how, in God's view, the child is still my responsibility because he was conceived while we were married. Emma has the audacity to exclaim, "Look at him, Jack. He may become yours. We don't know for sure. We know there was a paternity test. It appeared in your court documents." Her mother, "Those tests could be erroneous. Look into his eyes. They're just like yours." The boldness of these folks attempting to gaslight me is unbelievable. I told them to leave, and Mike shoved me, yelling, "You're going to abandon your wife and child. She is not my wife, and it isn't my child. And if you touch me again, I'll contact the police." Emma was sobbing uncontrollably. "Thank you, Jack. I can't do this alone. My parents are assisting, but I have had to stop my job. For a little moment, we are just scraping by. I almost feel bad. Almost. Then I recall the months of lies and dishonesty. Mike tries to approach me again, but his father stops him. "You're going to regret this. Mike claims we know where you work. We know your parents' address." That's when I take out my phone and begin recording. "Are you threatening me? Should I call the cops immediately, or do you want to go peacefully?" They eventually left, with Emma's father turning back to exclaim, "This is not what a real man would do." I just shook my head. A real man does not allow himself to be manipulated. The next day, Emma's relatives contacted Vanessa, attempting to revive the case. She turned it off instantly, reminding them of the definitive paternity test. I also put security cameras throughout my home and recorded the confrontation. Mike's threat to find out where I work was extremely alarming in case they tried anything else. So I informed my supervisor about the situation. Thor has been unusually clingy since that day. I have never been more grateful for this kitty. Edit. Thank you for your support. Yes. I made a police report regarding the threats. No, I do not feel sorry for Emma. I feel sorry for the youngster. However, just because I feel horrible does not make me responsible. Story 4. This article is titled, "My Girlfriend Cheated," and it states that I would never find someone like her. 1 year later, I'm dating a model who has had a crush on me since high school. Hello, everyone! Before we go into today's video, I need your help. We've noticed that the channel is losing traction, and subscribing is one of the best ways you can help us. It's quick, free, and allows us to continue bringing you great content. Your support means everything. Let us keep this channel growing collectively. Thank you very much. Now, let's begin the video. Hello, Reddit. I've been needing to get this off my chest for a while now. So I was browsing through here the other day when I came across this article about a guy whose girlfriend was straight up cheating on him and didn't even care because she was completely honest about it, as if cheating was no big issue. It reminded me of my own ex and everything I went through, so I decided to share my tale as well. This happened roughly 2 years ago. I met my ex. Let us call her Mia from one of those dating apps. Not the hookups, but the ones in which people claim to want real relationships. I was 33 and male. She was 30. We matched, began speaking, and man, we clicked straight away immediately. It's hard to explain, but we simply clicked. You know, we share the same sense of humor and hobbies, could talk for hours without becoming bored, following several weeks of texting and calling. I eventually asked her out for a proper date. I won't lie. I was nervous since she was so beautiful. Like a head-turning beauty. I am not suggesting I am ugly or anything. I consider myself to be reasonably attractive, but she was clearly in another league. I recall thinking that I wouldn't pursue anything serious with her since, Well, really attractive girls usually have a lot of options. Didn't want to be wounded. She showed up for our first date at this cool taco place downtown, and holy crap, guys. Pictures did not do her credit. She had long, dark hair, flawless skin, and was dressed in a simple black outfit that appeared to be tailored to her specifications. I thought I was going to make a fool of myself, but I managed to remain normal. The date was fantastic, just validated everything I felt during our internet conversations. We started seeing one another more frequently, and things became official quite quickly. Like, within a month, we were exclusive. I was waiting for the other shoe to drop, but she seemed to genuinely like me. One thing I kept thinking about was how much attention she received from other guys. She would tell me about it occasionally, even when we were together. Dudes would hit on her in front of me, or she'd receive messages from random males on social media. At first, I wasn't concerned about it. I trusted her and assumed she was really into me. Looking back, I was being ridiculous, but it was how I felt at the moment. I just wanted to enjoy being with her and not be the jealous, insecure boyfriend. I should mention that I work as a mechanical engineer for this company that manufactures industrial equipment. Not the most fascinating work in the world, but it pays well, and I am competent at it. Derek, my employer, is a real tool, though. One of those guys who takes credit for everyone else's efforts and blames others when things go wrong. He's around 45, divorced twice, drives an Audi he can't afford, and believes he is God's gift to women and the engineering world. Total corporate climber who doesn't care about anyone other than himself. Anyway, Mia and I settled into a really decent rhythm. We'd spend weekends together, take turns sleeping at each other's homes, and do all of the typical couple things. She worked as a part-time model and influencer. Thus, her schedule was unpredictable. She'd occasionally have photo shoots or events that kept her occupied for days. Then she'd have a week off. I never questioned it because, well, that's the industry, right? The first 3 months were practically ideal. We'd go out to eat, see movies, and go hiking occasionally. She even attended one of my softball games with my work team, which shocked me because she did not strike me as the type of person who sits in the stands and cheers. That day, she met several of my coworkers. But happily, Derek was not present. I was honestly concerned about him meeting her because he is such a creep around pretty ladies. So our friendship with Mia progressed quite quickly. Looking back, it seems strange, but everything seemed to be going well at the time. After roughly 8 months together, I began to wonder if this was the genuine deal. We were sitting in bed one night after watching some ridiculous Netflix show, just talking about random stuff as we always did. I don't even remember how the matter came up, but I mentioned the possibility of getting involved. Not like a proper proposal, with me on one knee and all. I just casually stated that I could see us headed in that way in the near future. To my total amazement, she became really enthused about it. Like, sat up straight in bed and began talking about ring style at breakneck speed. She liked the type of wedding she wanted and even the colors we should choose. To be honest, I was astonished. I mean, I brought it up, but I didn't expect her to embrace the notion with such enthusiasm. I recall thinking, holy crap, this is actually happening, and feeling as if I had won a lottery. This stunningly attractive woman wants to marry me. Regular old me. It was insane. The next few weeks were fantastic. We spent hours looking over apartments online. Her house was small, and mine was too far from her workplace. We're talking about our future together. Even prospective baby names, which were well ahead of my thoughts. But I went along with it because I was so pleased. I started saving extra money from each paycheck for a ring. I also displayed some photographs of the styles I was considering to my coworkers. Most of them were pleased for me, slapping me on the back and making jokes about locking things down and such. The standard man talks. Except Derek, of course. When he overheard us talking about ring buying at lunch one day, he said, "Peter, make sure she signs a prenup. Girls like that are always prepared with a backup plan." He also had a strange smirk on his face as he stated it. I just ignored it because Derek has always been a jerk, especially concerning relationships since his second divorce. But then, something shifted within me. At first, I didn't notice because it happened so gradually. But looking back, I see it as clearly as day. It was as if someone had flipped a switch in her brain. It began with small things. She'd take a while to respond to my texts, yet when we were together, she was completely addicted to her phone. She'd cancel plans at the last minute with vague justifications and show up late for events that were important to me. Then it became more evident. She began making comments about how I should treat her better, expected me to buy her costly things simply because I wanted to go to fine restaurants every weekend instead of our regular mix of beautiful places and cooking at home, and would send me links to luxury outfits and bags with notes like, "This would look so good on me." When I informed her I was attempting to prepare for our future for the ring she allegedly desired, she would say things like, "You need to understand that being with me is an investment. Do you know how many men would murder to be in your position? Who would say such a thing to someone they are supposed to love?" It was weird, man. As if she had suddenly decided she was royalty or something, and I should kiss the ground. She strolled on as if she was doing me a favor by accompanying me. Yeah, she's lovely. I've always known that. But expressing it that way made me feel as if her ego was rising to an uncomfortably high degree, as if she weren't simply confident. She was beginning to believe she was on an impenetrable pinnacle. It stuck with me for a while. My thoughts kept replaying, but as the days passed, it began to dissipate, getting thrown into the strange things she says, which I probably shouldn't ignore. Pile. The saddest part was that she stopped putting forth any effort herself. She never cooked anymore. Even though she used to make these incredible pasta meals, never suggested any date ideas. She was always on her phone while we were together. It was as if I was only there to provide for her, and she had no obligation to reciprocate. I tried to talk to her about it once, asking if there was something wrong or if I had done something to upset her. She basically became defensive and turned it around on me, accusing me of being overly needy and telling me to be more confident. She claimed her ex-boyfriends never required regular affirmation. However, I clearly did. That hurt. I'm not an insecure teenager, but it's natural to want your girlfriend to behave like she cares about you, right? After that conversation, I started doubting myself. Perhaps I was being overly sensitive. Perhaps this was simply what happens in relationships after the honeymoon period ended. But deep inside, I knew something was wrong. The lady I'd fallen for, the one who was so eager about our future together, appeared to be disappearing more and more every day, and I had no clue why. About a month into this new odd period of our relationship, I was promoted at work. Nothing significant. Simply a move up with greater responsibilities and more income. I was ecstatic since it meant I could start saving for that ring and our future together sooner. My company was holding a dinner to commemorate landing a large deal with a client in Japan. It was a formal affair, complete with invitations to significant others. I figured it would be a fantastic opportunity for me to meet my coworkers properly. Furthermore, the dinner was in a nice downtown restaurant that Mia had been hinting about wanting to try for weeks. When I informed her about it, she seemed strangely excited, like a lot more thrilled than was appropriate for a dull work meal. She kept asking who would be there, particularly if Derek would be present. I believed she was simply scared about seeing my employer, so I informed her that, yes, he was a complete jerk, but she didn't have to worry about impressing him or anything. I stopped by her apartment the night of the meal to pick her up, and holy stuff, she looked amazing. She had obviously spent hours getting ready in this tight red dress, which probably cost more than my monthly rent. Her makeup was flawless. Hair is done. It's all fancy. The works. Don't get me wrong, she was always attractive, but this was the next level. I remember thinking I was the luckiest guy in the world as I walked in with her. Strangely, as soon as we arrived at the restaurant, she began to ignore me, as if we were in a group conversation and she wouldn't look at me when I spoke. She was quite nice with everyone else, laughing at all their jokes and even stroking their arms when she spoke to them. All that flirtatious crap. But I have nothing, just cold. She kept finding reasons to chat with Derek. At first, I assumed she was simply being courteous, but it quickly became clear that she was flirting with him right in front of me and Derek. That arrogant guy was chewing it up, giving her these looks from far too close, and even placing his hand on her lower back. At one time, they were ordering drinks from the bar. I was getting angrier by the minute, but what was I going to do? Create a scene at a work function? I simply tried to ignore it. I convinced myself that I was overreacting. Perhaps she was simply trying to advance my career by wooing my employer. That's what I kept telling myself anyway. The drive home was tense. She spent the entire time commenting on Derek's impressiveness and apparent accomplishment, I wanted to puke because he had such an overwhelming presence. She kept bringing up everything he had told her about his holiday property in Florida and his money holdings. They'd evidently had this lengthy conversation while I was trapped talking with Dave from accounting about tax write-offs. When we went back to my apartment, I eventually confronted her about it. I was like, "What was it about? You were all over my boss that night." She merely laughed a false little giggle and added, "Are you really jealous? Grow up." I was simply being friendly. "Don't you want your employer to like me?" When I pointed out to her that being pleasant does not usually entail caressing someone's arm and giggling at whatever they say, she became defensive, accusing me of being controlling and insecure, and turned the entire situation on me, as if I was the problem for bringing it up. We got into a major fight over it. She continued saying things like, "This is exactly why I can't take you anywhere." She even hinted that Derek would be successful if he weren't so whiny and insecure. That was the first time we ever went to bed upset with each other. So, I went to bed, angry. She played on her phone for hours with her back to me, as if she didn't care. After that night, things became increasingly stranger. She began texting all the time, but being overly discreet about it caused her phone to turn off. When I walked by, he went to the bathroom to accept calls. All of the standard sleazy conduct you see in movies, but you don't believe anyone is cheating that openly. The following weekend, she abruptly canceled our plans, claiming she had a fantastic chance for a photo shoot that would greatly enhance her portfolio. I was disappointed, but I expressed my understanding. I spent that Saturday doing chores and playing video games, trying to ignore the strange feeling in my gut that something wasn't right. So I texted one of her model friends to see how the shoot went. Playing the supportive lover, her pal had no idea what I was talking about and stated that she was unaware of any shoots. My stomach sank. I didn't respond. I just sat there, phone in hand, staring at the screen as if it might change the result, but it was already evident. She was not on a shoot. She was somewhere else. When she returned home, I simply acted normally, as if I didn't already know she had flat out lied to me. She didn't seem off, didn't appear guilty or nervous, but something was off, subtle. As if she was hiding something and was just excellent at concealing it. A week later, she was scheduled to meet me for lunch near my office. We'd been planning it for days because our schedules were so hectic, specifically hers, not mine. Surprise. Surprise. She texted at the last minute to say she couldn't make it again. Something about a picture shoot chance with a significant customer that would greatly benefit her career. By this point, I was distrustful of these unexpected possibilities, which I knew to be lies. I decided to investigate what she was actually up to. I told my team leader. I took a long lunch and then left. I did not even have a plan. Really, I just decided to drive by her place first to see if her car was there. It was not, but as I was ready to depart, I noticed her turning into the parking lot of her building. She was far more dressed up than she would be for a conventional picture shoot, where makeup and other preparations are done on site. She checked her phone, got back in her car, and drove away again. I followed her. I understand that seems stalkerish, but what would you do? I kept a few cars between us, feeling like an amateur investigator in a lousy film. She drove to a beautiful hotel downtown, about a block from my office, parked in the guest lot, and entered. I parked across the street and sat for a bit, not sure what to do next. Part of me wanted to walk inside and confront her, but what if it was actually a job issue? Perhaps she was meeting a customer or something. After approximately 20 minutes of sitting there like an idiot, I noticed Derek's Audi drive into the hotel parking lot. The only reason I remembered him was because of his dumb vanity plate, which said Boss Man. I swore. Guys like that are extremely predictable. My stomach sank. No way. It was a coincidence. I got out of the car and crossed the street. I'm not even sure what I was going to do. I was on my way to the hotel entrance when I came to a complete stop. There they were. Derek and Mia exit the hotel's front doors together, all over one another. He had one arm around her waist. She was chuckling about something he said. Then they kissed right on the sidewalk. Not just a short kiss, but a full-fledged makeout session. As if they were teenagers or something. I hid behind a parked van, so they couldn't see me. My heart was racing so fiercely that I thought I'd throw up right there. I couldn't believe what I was witnessing, and it was right in front of me. The woman I wanted to marry was cheating on me with my jerk employer. I watched them say their goodbyes, He handed her what appeared to be cash, which she placed in her purse before getting into an Uber. Derek fixed his tie, put on his sunglasses, and strolled back to the office. I actually couldn't move for maybe 5 minutes. My legs felt like they were made of concrete. When I eventually got it together, I texted my team leader and informed him that I was sick and wanted to go home. There was no way I could see Derek that afternoon. There was no way I could concentrate on work. I just went home and sat in my empty apartment, trying to figure out what the heck to do. I experienced all of the feelings you would expect: shock, denial, sadness, anger. I could not believe she would do this to me. And with my supervisor, of all people, it felt like they'd collaborated to embarrass me in the worst way possible. I went back through her texts from the previous few weeks and noticed patterns. All of those unexpected cancellations and business emergencies coincided with days when Derek left the office early. All those times she was too tired to hang out coincided with days when I knew Derek had meetings away from the office. Then I remembered something from our business meal. I overheard Derek informing someone that he was heading to Japan next month to finalize the contract with our new client. Mia indicated just yesterday that she might have a modeling assignment in Tokyo around the same time. It became so evident now. The saddest thing was realizing she was probably only with me because she needed a stable backup while she pursued Richard. Guys, all that talk about marriage and our shared future, was any of it real, or was I just her backup plan? I returned to work the next day and tried to act normal, but it was a pain. Derek began making comments in meetings such as, "Pete looks tired today, and not everyone has what it takes to succeed in this industry." I wanted to jump across the table and strangle him. During lunch, I overheard him on the phone in the break room. He apparently didn't see I was there, grabbing something from the fridge. I heard him say, "Yes, babe, I'll give you the cash tomorrow. Just make sure you wear the black item I adore." Then he laughed and added, "No, poor sucker thinks you're into him." I nearly lost it right then, but I managed to walk away without him noticing me. Now I had solid proof from his own mouth that not only was he sleeping with my girlfriend, but they were both laughing about it behind my back while he paid her. I spent the entire day at work planning what I wanted to say to Mia. Should I yell and cry? Be calm. I must have imagined the conversation in 50 different ways. I only knew I needed answers, and I needed to look her in the eyes when she provided them to me. When I arrived home, I texted her to see if she wanted to come over for supper. I tried to sound natural, as if everything was all right. She answered that she was quite busy but could accommodate me for a couple of hours later that night. The way she said it made my blood boil, as if seeing her partner was a duty she needed to mark off her to-do list. She arrived around 8:30, looking a little distracted. She kept checking her phone every few minutes while I was making pasta. I tried to seem casual, asking about her day and such, but inside I felt like a pressure cooker about to erupt. We ate dinner with her, barely paying attention to what I said. She continued bringing up the possibility of a great opportunity in Japan. I'm not even trying to disguise it anymore. I merely nodded and let her speak, waiting for the appropriate moment. After dinner, we sat on the couch to watch television. She spent the entire time looking through Instagram, hardly appearing to watch the show. That's when I realized I couldn't handle it anymore. I grabbed the remote, switched off the television, and turned to face her. "How long have you slept with Derek?" I asked directly. Her gaze lifted from her phone to the sight on her face. I'll never forget this. First shock. Then there's this outburst of wrath. Then this strange, deliberate idea appeared, as if she was deciding out the best way to play this. "What exactly are you talking about?" She tried, but her voice was very unsteady. Her eyes would not meet mine. "Do not lie to me," I said, amazed at how calm I sounded, despite feeling like I was tearing apart inside. "I saw you leave the hotel market with him last week. I overheard him on the phone with you today. I know he is paying you." She stared at me for what seemed like an eternity. Then her entire demeanor shifted. "Fine," she said, flicking her hair over her shoulder, as if we were talking about something as simple as the weather. "Yes, I have been seeing Derek, and he occasionally offers me money." "So, what? Can he afford to treat me better than you could?" "So what?" I repeated, unable to believe what I was hearing. "So you have been cheating on me with my boss?" She rolled her eyes, as if I was being overly dramatic. "It's simply business, baby. He pays for my time. I make him feel good. It doesn't have to change anything in our relationship." I felt like I was in a crazy alternate dimension. Was she genuinely recommending that we continue dating while she, what? Prostituted herself before my boss? Are you serious now? I was virtually shouting. You're practically admitting you're awake. Careful. She stopped me short, her gaze sharpening. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm taking advantage of what I have. Most men would understand that. Most men recognize that their girlfriends are sleeping with other men for money. I couldn't believe what I heard. She shrugged, as if we were having a tiny debate about where to buy takeout. Derek is not the only one. There are a few guys who value what I bring to the table enough to pay for it. I felt as if I had been hit in the stomach and was physically sick. So much discussion about getting engaged and our future together. Oh, please, she laughed, and that was the coldest sound I had ever heard. You are cute, and you make a good boyfriend, but let's get real. You should be grateful that I gave you the time of day. Do you realize how many men would die to be in your shoes? Get the heck out, I replied quietly. Excuse me, get out! I shrieked and jumped to my feet. Get your belongings and get out of my apartment. She seemed surprised, as if she couldn't believe I was standing up for myself. She seemed to want me to simply accept everything and be grateful for any attention she was prepared to give me. You are making a tremendous mistake, she remarked as she gathered her handbag. You'll never find someone like me again. Thank God for that, I said. I'd rather be alone than with a prostitute. She slammed the door as soon as she left. I totally lost it, punched a pillow so hard that I believe I damaged my wrist, then slumped on the floor and remained there for hours trying to understand what had just happened. The worst part was not even the cheating. It was discovering that the lady I thought I loved, the one I was about to propose to, had never existed. The real Mia saw me as nothing more than a convenience, a backup plan, someone to pay the bills while she pursued wealthier men. The next morning, she tried to call me, as if nothing had happened. I immediately sent it to voicemail. Then she texted me, claiming we needed to talk and that I was overreacting. Can you believe it? I caught her cheating on me with my boss, discovered she was being paid for it, and now I'm overreacting. I blocked her number immediately. I couldn't take her manipulative behavior any longer. The worst was yet to come. However, despite everything I knew, I had to go to work and confront Derek. The prospect of that made me physically ill, yet I needed the work. I couldn't just quit without a backup plan, so I dragged myself to the office, feeling absolutely terrible. Knowing I was about to confront the guy who had been sleeping with my fiancé behind my back, I had to behave normally until I could figure out what to do next. The next few weeks at work were a unique form of misery. Every time Derek passed by my desk, I wanted to jump up and knock those gorgeous teeth down his throat. He acted entirely normal, as if he hadn't been hitting on my girlfriend behind my back and paying her for it. Actually, worse than usual. He appeared happier than normal, always whistling and smiling. Probably thought he got away with it. When Mia realized I had banned her phone number, she kept attempting to reach me. She began emailing me after I banned her email. She began reaching out through pals. When that didn't work, she came to my apartment one night. I did not let her in. I spoke to her through the door, like some crazy. She was crying, stating she had made a terrible mistake and that she genuinely loved me. Derek, she said, did not mean anything to her. It was only about the money, as if that made it better. I told her to leave before I called the police. That's when she became nasty. I started yelling that I was a loser. She had only been with me because she felt sorry for me. Derek claimed he was twice the man I would ever be. I said I'd never find someone as attractive as her. You are welcome to touch me. Really wonderful item. That night, my neighbors got an earful. Following that delightful stay, I immediately began seeking another job. I couldn't continue working for Derek knowing what I knew. I sent out resumes to about 20 different companies. It took approximately a month, but I eventually received an offer from one of our competitors. Better wages and benefits, and a supervisor who didn't sleep with my ex. I submitted my 2-week notice the same day. Derek appeared astonished when I told him I was leaving. Had the audacity to question why I would want to quit when I had such a bright future in the company. I just stated that I had found a better offer and ended the conversation. It wasn't worth getting into it with him. My last week at the company, I was cleaning out my desk when I overheard Derek speaking with some of the other managers in the conference room. The door was cracked open, and I could hear him gushing about his stunning model girlfriend, saying she was pricey, but worth every penny. said she will accompany him to Japan next month. It took all in me not to walk in and expose him in front of everyone, but I managed to keep my cool. I finished collecting my belongings and left that poisoned environment for good. Moved forward around 3 months. My new employment was going well. Better work environment, cooler projects, and co-workers that appear to respect one another. I was finally feeling like myself again, without continuously looking over my shoulder or questioning my own value. Then came my 15-year high school reunion. I was unsure if I wanted to go. Social events were not my thing. Even before all of the media hoopla, some old baseball team buddies told me that it would be wonderful to catch up with people and have a good time while I was there. I ran across this girl, Sophie's best friend, who had been in my high school class, tall and gorgeous, definitely the most beautiful girl in our year. We were friendly back then, but never really close. She was more of an artist, often doodling in notebooks, whereas I was just an ordinary sports and video game guy. Sophie graduated from high school and became a legitimate professional model. Like, the real deal? Not what Mia purported to be. Sophie had appeared in magazines and ads for well-known brands. Meanwhile, Jen, her best friend, had stayed in town and become a kindergarten teacher. Jen and I went to talking about old times, and she kept giving me this strange smile, as if she knew something I didn't. Jen's smile widened even further when I revealed Sophie's question about her current whereabouts. "I know she'll kill me for telling you this," Jen continued, coming in close as if she were sharing some big secret. "However, Sophie had the biggest crush on you in high school. Like, huge. She used to doodle your name into her sketchbooks." I just chuckled. "I mean, come on, Sophie." The girl who went on to appear in actual Vogue spreads has a crush on regular old me. Even as a backup pitcher on a terrible baseball team in high school, it looked absolutely ludicrous. Sophie was winning art competitions and getting scouted by modeling agencies. Sophie didn't seem to remember me. I informed Jen, but she insisted. She genuinely contacted me to see whether you were attending the reunion because she couldn't make it. Jen stated that she is in Europe for work, doing a campaign for a luxury brand in Brussels. She asked directly about you. "I wanted to see if you were still as cute as you were in calculus." I spent the rest of the night reflecting on what Jen had said. It was very surprising. I will not lie. It felt wonderful to know that Sophie was interested in me, especially after Mia's BS on how blessed I was to have her the following day on a whim. I took a chance, located Sophie on Instagram, and messaged her. Just something simple, like stating it was fantastic to hear about her success that Jen had remarked. We missed her at the reunion, and that it would be fun to get up someday. Then I waited, and waited. 5 days passed with nothing. I had very well forgotten about it. I assumed she was preoccupied with her actual successful modeling career when she suddenly responded. Her letter was very excited, with several exclamation points and emoticons. She was really delighted to hear from me. We began messaging back and forth, catching up on the previous decade and more of our lives. We talked about high school, what we've been up to since then, our jobs, families, and everything. After a few days of constant messaging, Sophie suggested we transition to video calls. Said typing was becoming tedious. The first video call was weird. There I was, chatting face-to-face with this woman whose image had appeared on billboards, and she was laughing at my stupid jokes like we were in high school. She was extremely down-to-earth and genuine. There's nothing like Mia's deliberate manipulation. The more we talked, the more I recognized what a genuine connection was like. She asked me questions about my engineering career and truly listened to my responses. Never made me feel unworthy. She was frank about her own fears and challenges in the modeling world. After a few weeks of almost daily communication, it began to feel like we were dating, despite the fact that we were separated by an ocean. I decided to put it out there and ask, "What are we doing here?" She smiled. With that wonderful smile, she replied, "I'd like to think we're building something special." I've always regretted not telling you how I felt during high school. That is all I needed to hear. I asked if she wanted to make it official, and she immediately agreed. I was seeing a true model who liked me for who I was, not for what I could offer or as a backup plan. When she offered that I visit her in Brussels while she finished her campaign, I didn't hesitate and booked a flight using some of my new job signing bonus. Best decision I've ever made. The trip was incredible. Sophie introduced me to everyone on her team and proudly referred to me as her boyfriend. She was quite professional on set, yet she would wink at me between takes. There's nothing artificial about her achievement. She worked hard, and everyone appreciated her for it. I snapped a lot of photos during her photo shoot and shared some of my Instagram close friends' stories, completely forgetting Mia was still on the list. I rarely used Instagram, so I didn't think to block her there. A few hours later, I received a message from her. "Who is that? Why are you playing groupie?" With the laughing emoji. I simply said, "That's my girlfriend. There's nothing else." She did not answer immediately. I could see the typing signal emerge and disappear for around 10 minutes, as if she were composing and revising her response. Finally, she sent, "Sure." That's when I decided to put a little spin on things. I wrote back, "If you thought you were out of my league, Sophie is on another level. How is Derek doing? Still making you work hard for those luxury bags?" I knew it would hurt. She read the message and did not answer. Then I blocked her on Instagram too. It felt so fantastic, but she crawled back. I received a knock on my door one evening, months after I had blocked her everywhere. I opened it, and there she was, standing in my hallway like a sad rom-com reject. "Hey," she said, her tone quiet and pathetic. I just stared. "Can I come inside?" She tried again, shifting her weight as if standing still was exhausting. "No." She gulped hard, clearly not anticipating that. "Pete, I made a mistake, okay? I see it now. I was stupid." I folded my arms, unimpressed. "Yeah. Concerning which part?" "Cheating and lying. The point at which you treated me like a walking ATM." Her eyes welled up, but I didn't buy the performance. "You were the only guy who wanted to have a meaningful relationship with me. Do you know what it's been like out there? Every guy I date, just..." She paused, attempting to make herself sound tragic. "Uses me. No one cares about me like you do. You saw me for who I really was." I gave a quick laugh. "Yes, that is why I walked away." She sniffed. "Please, Pete, give me another chance. I swear I have changed." "I miss us. You is being treated as a person rather than a transaction," I corrected. "But that's no longer my problem." She drew a hesitant breath, perhaps expecting me to give in, but I did not. She attempted to pretend she still had the upper hand. "So, what? Are you genuinely happy with her? Do you believe she is better than me?" I gave a quick laugh. "You already saw the solution, didn't you? That is why you are here." Her eyes flashed with something. Jealousy. Regret. Perhaps both. "You had a shot," I continued, going back into the doorway, "and you blew it. Now, if you'll excuse me, I have a FaceTime rendezvous with a real model who recognizes my value without a price tag." Mia opened her mouth, as if she intended to speak something. Maybe one more desperate attempt, but I didn't hang around to hear it. I closed the door in her face, locked it, and did not look back. About a week later, I learned from a former coworker that Derek was dismissed for sexual harassment. Apparently, he attempted his cash for company agreement with the incorrect woman. It couldn't have happened to a better guy. Sophie and I have been happily dating since our trip to Brussels. And I won't lie, I'm considering proposing before the end of the year. And this time, it is with a woman who truly deserves it. Someone who recognizes my worth and does not make me feel lucky simply to be with her. People who believe they are superior to others frequently find themselves alone. And sometimes, the individual who is treated poorly finally gets a break. So that is my tale. Reddit still feels strange typing it all out, but it's also kind of soothing. Thank you for reading my novel-length post. If you're dealing with someone like me, know that there are better individuals out there who will value you for who you are rather